The stagecoach door slammed shut like a coffin lid. Through the dust-caked window, 23-year-old Mara Densley watched a lone cowboy stand motionless in the middle of the westward trail, his hand resting on his holster, his eyes fixed on her uncle's hired escort. In 30 seconds, that stranger would change everything. He would stop her from being delivered like cargo to a marriage she never chose. He would offer her something no man ever had, a real choice. But first, he would have to face down 3 armed men who had orders to make sure she arrived at her cage on time. If you want to see how one act of defiance can rewrite a woman's entire destiny, stay with me until the very end of this story. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment telling me what city you're watching from. I love seeing how far these tales travel. The July heat turned the stagecoach into a rolling oven. Mara Densley pressed her handkerchief against her throat and watched the Massachusetts countryside give way to something wilder, something that didn't know her name or care about the debts her father left behind. 3 weeks ago, she'd owned a print shop. Small, yes, tucked between a milliner and a tobacco merchant on Hanover Street. But hers. She could still smell the ink, still feel the weight of the press lever under her palm. Her father had taught her to set type before she could read. And after the fever took him last winter, she'd kept the business alive through sheer stubbornness and 16-hour days. Then the creditors came. They'd descended like crows the morning after the funeral, waving papers she'd never seen, debts her father had apparently signed away in his final, desperate months. The shop was gone by sunset, the apartment above it gone by dawn. Everything except the carpetbag now wedged between her feet and the future her mother's brother had purchased for her. "You'll be grateful," her Uncle Gideon had said, his voice carrying that particular tone wealthy men use when they're being generous with other people's lives. "The Blackwell family is respectable. Howard may be twice your age, but he'll provide stability. A woman in your position can't afford to be particular. A woman in your position." Translation: broke, orphaned, and rapidly approaching the age where Boston society would start calling her a spinster, with that mix of pity and contempt reserved for women who'd failed their primary function. So here she sat, wedged between a whiskey drummer who'd been asleep since Hartford and a minister's wife, who kept glancing at Mara's unchaperoned state with barely concealed disapproval. Across from them, Uncle Gideon's escort, a man named Vance Cutler, who wore his gun like jewelry and his smile like a threat. "Almost there, Miss Densley," Cutler said, his voice honey smooth. "Another 2 hours and you'll be at your uncle's house. Wedding's set for Saturday, I hear. 4 days. Barely enough time to let out your dress." The minister's wife made a small, approving sound. The whiskey drummer snored. Mara said nothing. She'd learned in the past 3 weeks that silence was safer than screaming. The landscape outside had changed while she'd been lost in memory. Gone were the tidy farms and painted churches of New England. The road now cut through something rougher, land that rolled like frozen waves, scattered with scrub oak and prairie grass that bent beneath wind you couldn't see but could feel in your bones. The West, or at least the edge of it. The coach lurched suddenly, throwing Mara against the minister's wife, who made a scandalized noise and clutched her Bible like a shield. "What in blazes?" The whiskey drummer jerked awake, his sample case clattering to the floor. Cutler was already at the window, his hand on his gun. "Driver, what's the—" But the coach was slowing, wheels grinding against packed earth, leather traces creaking as the horses fought the brake. They stopped. Silence rushed in like water filling a sinking ship. Even the wind seemed to be holding its breath. "Stay here," Cutler ordered. He kicked open the door and dropped to the ground in one smooth motion, his boots raising small clouds of dust. Mara leaned toward the window. Through the grimy glass, she could see the road ahead, and the man blocking it. He sat on his horse like he'd grown there, back straight, shoulders easy, hat pulled low enough to shadow his face. Behind him, maybe 20 head of cattle wandered across the trail, in no particular hurry to be anywhere else. But it wasn't the cattle that made Mara's breath catch. It was the way he sat there, completely still, completely calm, like he had all the time in the world and knew exactly how that fact would irritate anyone who didn't. "You're blocking the road," Cutler's voice carried clearly through the still air. The cowboy didn't move. "Am I?" "Move your stock, now." "Can't do that." "Can't or won't." "Does the distinction matter to you?" Even from inside the coach, Mara could see Cutler's jaw tighten. He took 3 steps forward, his hand drifting to his hip. I'm on a schedule. You've got 30 seconds to clear out, or what? The cowboy's voice was quiet, conversational even, but something in it made the minister's wife gasp and clutch her Bible tighter. You gonna shoot my cattle? That'll really speed things up. I'll shoot you if I have to. No, you won't. The certainty in those 3 words was absolute. Not bravado, not threat, just fact, delivered the same way you'd mention rain or sunset. Cutler's hand was definitely on his gun now. You don't know who you're... I know exactly who I'm dealing with. The cowboy finally moved, shifting his weight just enough to make his horse sidestep. The motion brought his face into clearer view. Hired escort, probably carrying papers that say you've got legal custody of cargo in that coach. Probably getting paid good money to make sure that cargo arrives undamaged and on schedule. Mara's heart kicked against her ribs. But here's what you don't know, the cowboy continued. You don't know how long it'll take my cattle to mosey on down this road. Could be 10 minutes, could be 3 hours. Cattle are unpredictable that way. Spookeasy too, especially when there's shouting or gunfire. The minister's wife was praying now, her lips moving soundlessly. The whiskey drummer pulled a flask from his coat. Mara pressed her palm flat against the window, her fingers leaving prints in the dust. I could just go around, Cutler said, or Chedsford. You could try, but see that gully to the west? And that rock slide to the east? This is the only road for 5 miles that'll take a coach, unless you want to carry your passenger on your back. Cutler turned then, looking back at the coach, looking directly at Mara. She saw the calculation in his eyes, the weighing of options, the decision that whatever he was being paid wasn't worth a range war with a crazy cowboy and his inconvenient cattle. Fine. He bit the word off like chewing leather. We wait. Sensible. The cowboy touched the brim of his hat. Won't be long. Maybe. Cutler stalked back toward the coach, murder written in every line of his body. But before he could reach the door, the cowboy spoke again. Course, if the lady wants to stretch her legs while we wait, I got no objection. Long ride from Boston. Must be uncomfortable in there. Every head in the coach turned to stare at Mara. She's fine where she is, Cutler snapped. I wasn't asking you. The cowboy was looking at the coach now, looking at her, even though Mara knew he couldn't possibly see through the dust-covered window. Ma'am, you want some air? The minister's wife grabbed Mara's wrist. Don't you dare. A decent woman doesn't... But Mara was already moving. Her hand found the door handle, turned it, pushed. The heat hit her first. Then the light, harsh and white, and nothing like Boston's filtered gray. Then the space, stretching out in all directions like someone had cracked the world open and let the sky pour in. And then the cowboy's eyes. He'd pushed his hat back and she could see them now, brown, sun-weathered at the corners, and holding an expression she couldn't quite name. Not pity, not curiosity exactly. Recognition, maybe. Like looking in a mirror and seeing someone else's trapped animal stare looking back. Miss Densley, get back in the coach. Cutler was beside her now, his hand reaching for her arm. Don't touch her. The cowboy hadn't raised his voice, hadn't moved, but Cutler's hand stopped mid-reach like he'd hit an invisible wall. She's my responsibility, Cutler said. I've got papers. Papers that say you can manhandle her? Papers that say I can transport her to her uncle's house and ensure she arrives intact and on time. Intact. The cowboy's mouth twisted. Interesting word choice. Mara found her voice. It came out rougher than she intended, dry from hours of breathing coach dust and swallowing words she couldn't say. Why did you stop us? The cowboy looked at her for a long moment. Then he swung down from his horse in one fluid motion and walked toward her, stopping a careful 3 feet away. Close enough to talk. Far enough not to crowd. Up close he was younger than she'd thought. Maybe 30, give or take. Dust-covered and sun-darkened, with the kind of lean build that came from work, not exercise. His gun belt was worn smooth, the leather almost white where his hand habitually rested. Because, he said quietly, about a mile back, I saw a woman crying in a stagecoach window. And something about the way that escort of yours looked at you made me think maybe you weren't crying from joy about wherever you're headed. Mara's throat closed. Was I wrong? He asked. She should say yes, should laugh it off, climb back into the coach, arrive at Uncle Gideon's house where a wedding dress was probably already waiting, where Howard Blackwell was probably already counting the days until he could mold his young wife into whatever shape fit his needs. Should say yes and be grateful for the cage, like Uncle Gideon had instructed. Instead, she said, no. One word, 2 letters, a confession that felt like stepping off a cliff. The cowboy nodded like she'd just confirmed something he'd already known. You got family where you're headed? An uncle. He good to you? He's arranging a marriage. Did you ask him to? No. You want to marry this man? I've never met him. Something flickered across the cowboy's face. Anger, maybe, or something older and tireder than anger. But you're going anyway. It wasn't a question, but Mara answered it. I don't have a choice. That's where you're wrong, ma'am. Cutler laughed, sharp and ugly. She's broke and orphaned. What choice does she have? Starve? Work in a factory? Sell herself on the street? She could work for me. The words dropped into the conversation like stones into still water. Mara stared at him. What? I need help. The cowboy pulled off his hat, ran a hand through sweat-damp hair. Got a ranch about 15 miles west of here. 300 acres, 60 head of cattle, more work than 3 men can handle. And I'm drowning in paperwork. You want to hire her as a ranch hand? Cutler's voice dripped disbelief. Look at her. She's a city girl. Probably never touched a cow in her life. Don't need her to touch cows. The cowboy was still looking at Mara. You said you ran a business. In Boston. For how long? 5 years, Mara heard herself say. After my father got sick, I managed the print shop. Books, contracts, invoices, payroll. Can you read legal documents? Yes. Write clear contracts? Yes. Track expenses and catch when someone's cheating you? Yes. I did that, regularly. The cowboy's mouth quirked. Not quite a smile, but close. Then you can do something I can't. I can break horses and birth calves and keep cattle alive through winter, but paperwork? Might as well be Greek. Already lost 2 shipments this year because I signed contracts I didn't fully understand. Got a land dispute brewing because I can't make sense of the property surveys. Need someone who can think in words and numbers instead of weather and horseflesh. He said it plainly, without shame. Like admitting weakness was just another fact, no different from rain or sunset. Mara's heart was doing something strange in her chest. You want to hire me as what? A bookkeeper? Partner, if you want the proper term. You handle the business end, contracts, accounts, legal documentation. I handle the ranch end. 50-50 split of the profits after expenses. That's insane, Cutler said flatly. You don't know her. She could rob you blind. Could say the same about any hired hand. At least she's got references. The cowboy turned to Cutler. I assume Gideon Rourke wouldn't send his niece west unless she had some kind of documentation. Letters of introduction, maybe? Proof of good character from her Boston associates? Cutler's face went carefully blank. Thought so, the cowboy said. So we know she's educated, experienced in business, and vouched for by respectable people. That's more than most ranch hands can claim. This is ridiculous. She's promised to nothing, Mara said. Both men turned to stare at her. Her voice was steadier now, fueled by something that felt dangerously like hope. I never agreed to this marriage. Uncle Gideon arranged it, but I never said yes, never signed anything, never gave my consent. Your consent isn't required, Cutler said. Your uncle is your legal guardian. He has the right to set. I'm 23 years old. I'm not a child. You're an unmarried woman with no property and no prospects. In the eyes of the law, you're your uncle's responsibility until you're married and become your husband's responsibility. Funny how the law works, the cowboy said mildly. Always seems to land hardest on people who can't afford lawyers. This is none of your business, Cutler snapped. I'm making it my business. Why? Cutler's hand was back on his gun. Why do you even care what happens to some girl you've never met? The cowboy was quiet for a moment. When he spoke, his voice was soft, but it carried. Because I've got a sister, had a sister. And when she needed help, when she needed someone to stop the coach and give her a choice, nobody did. So she got married to a respectable man in a respectable house, and 6 months later they buried her in a respectable grave. He looked at Mara. I can't help her now. But I can help you, if you want help. The minister's wife gasped. The whiskey drummer took another pull from his flask, and Mara felt something crack open in her chest. Some locked room she'd been sealed inside since the creditors came, since Uncle Gideon's letter arrived, since the world narrowed to a single path with no exits. What exactly are you offering? She asked. Legal partnership, room and board, wages, let's say $30 a month while we figure out the profit split. Your own space, I've got a spare room in the main house, or you can take the foreman's cabin if you want privacy. And you walk away whenever you want. No contracts, no obligations, just work for work and pay for pay. And if I say no, then I tip my hat and move my cattle and you continue on to your uncle's house. Your choice, ma'am. That's the point. Your choice. How long since anyone had said those words to her? How long since she'd felt anything other than obligations pressing down like stones? Don't listen to him, the minister's wife called from the coach. A decent woman doesn't go off alone with a strange man. Think of your reputation. My reputation, Mara said slowly, died with my father's business. Right now I'm just trying to stay alive. She turned to the cowboy. How do I know you're telling the truth? How do I know this isn't some trick? You don't. He said it plainly, without offense. But neither do I. Don't know if you're a good bookkeeper or a terrible one. Don't know if you'll stick around or run off first time the work gets hard. We're both taking a risk. Difference is, your risk gets you a choice. Mine just gets me help I desperately need. This is kidnapping, Cutler said. His hand was definitely on his gun now. I've got legal authority to transport a willing passenger, the cowboy interrupted. She stops being willing, your authority stops mattering. Gideon Rourke will hunt you down. He's got connections, money, power. I've got a legal land deed and a business proposition. Nothing kidnapped, nothing stolen. Just an employer and an employee coming to terms. Nobody will believe that. Then I guess we'll find out. The cowboy extended his hand toward Mara. Not grabbing, not demanding, just offering. What do you say, ma'am? You want to take the bet? Mara looked at that outstretched hand. Calloused and scarred, dirt under the nails, sun-weathered and work-worn. Nothing like the soft, manicured hands of Howard Blackwell, whose photograph Uncle Gideon had sent. A thick-necked man with cold eyes, and the smile of someone who'd never been told no. She looked back at the coach, at the road leading to her uncle's house, at the wedding dress waiting like a shroud. She looked at Cutler, whose hand was now openly resting on his gun. She looked at the endless sky, the rolling land, the space that seemed to go on forever. And then she looked at the cowboy, whose eyes held no promises except honesty, and whose offer was simpler than any marriage contract, work for pay, choice for choice, risk for risk. I don't even know your name, she said. Caleb Holt. Mara Densley. Pleased to meet you, Miss Densley. She took his hand. His grip was firm, brief, and absolutely impersonal, like shaking hands with a business partner, not a savior or a threat. I'll take the job, she said, on one condition. Name it. I want it in writing, signed and witnessed. I've learned the hard way that verbal promises don't survive in court. Caleb's mouth quirked into something that was definitely a smile this time. Smart. I can do that. Then, yes, I accept your offer. Cutler's gun cleared leather. She's not going anywhere. But Caleb was already moving, not toward his own gun, but toward the coach driver who'd been watching the whole exchange with the wide-eyed fascination of someone witnessing a train wreck. You, Caleb called up, you see this? You see Miss Densley accept my employment offer of her own free will? The driver blinked. Yes? And you, ma'am? Caleb addressed the minister's wife. You heard her say yes? This is highly improper. But did you hear her say yes? Well, yes, but... And you, sir? He looked at the whiskey drummer. Hell yes, I heard it. The drummer grinned. Best entertainment I've had all week. 3 witnesses, Caleb said, turning back to Cutler. All heard Miss Densley verbally accept employment and state her intention to leave the coach. No kidnapping, no coercion, just a woman exercising her legal right to seek employment. Her uncle will sue you into the ground, Cutler snarled. He can try. Caleb's voice was still calm, but there was iron underneath now. But here's what'll happen if you draw that gun. You'll shoot me, probably. But Henry up there, he jerked his thumb at the driver, he'll testify you shot an unarmed man making a legal business proposition. The law doesn't look kindly on that, even in ranch country, and Gideon Rourke's reputation will take a hit. The man whose hired thug murdered someone to force his niece into an unwanted marriage. That'll play real well in the newspapers. Cutler's finger twitched on the trigger. Plus, Caleb added, my ranch hands are watching from that rise behind you. You shoot me, they'll make sure you don't ride away to tell any version of events except the true one. Mara's gaze snapped to the ridgeline. Sure enough, 2 figures sat on horseback, silhouetted against the afternoon sky. Cutler saw them too. His face went white, then red, then settled into a kind of sick rage. You planned this. Nope. Just got lucky. They were moving cattle to the south pasture and heard voices, came to investigate. Caleb's voice was mild, but his eyes were hard. Now you've got a choice. You can holster that gun, get back in the coach, and tell Gideon Rourke his niece found employment. Or you can try shooting your way through 3 witnesses, 2 ranch hands, and me. Your call. The silence stretched like taffy. Then Cutler's hand slowly moved away from his gun. This isn't over, he said. Probably not, Caleb agreed. But it's over for today. Cutler looked at Mara, really looked at her with an expression she couldn't quite read. Disgust, maybe, or something almost like pity. You're making a mistake. Maybe, Mara said, but it's my mistake to make. He climbed back into the coach without another word. The driver, looking deeply relieved to be leaving, snapped the reins. The horses lurched forward, eager to be moving again. The minister's wife stuck her head out the window as they passed. You'll regret this. Mark my words, you'll... Her voice faded as the coach rolled away, disappearing in a cloud of dust that slowly settled back to earth. And then there was just silence. And space. And Mara standing in the middle of a road going nowhere she'd planned, with a man she'd met 10 minutes ago and a future that was suddenly, terrifyingly blank. Well, Caleb said, that went better than expected. Mara's laugh came out half hysterical. Better than expected? He almost shot you. Almost only counts in horseshoes and hand grenades. He walked over to where his horse was patiently waiting, swung into the saddle. You ride? No. Course not. He considered for a moment, then whistled. One of the figures on the ridge started down toward them. Tom will bring the wagon, more comfortable for the trip back. Back to your ranch. Our ranch, technically. You're a partner now, remember? The reality of it hit her like a wave. She'd just thrown away her entire life. Uncle Gideon's protection, the marriage arrangement, any hope of returning to Boston's respectable society, for a handshake deal with a stranger and $30 a month. Her carpet bag was still in the coach. Oh God, she whispered. My things. Everything I own is in that coach. Caleb's expression shifted to something gentler. What was in there? Anything you can't replace? Clothes. A photograph of my parents. My father's watch. The photograph and watch. Were they in the carpet bag or in your pockets? Mara's hand went automatically to her skirt pocket. Her fingers found the hard outline of the watch case and the small envelope with her parents' wedding photograph. She'd kept them on her person, too precious to risk losing if the bag fell from the coach roof. I have them, she realized. Then everything else is just things. We can replace things. With what money? The practicality of it was sinking in now. I don't even have a change of clothes. My sister's things are still in the house. She was about your size. You can use what fits until we get to town and buy you something new. He said it matter-of-factly, but Mara caught the tightness around his eyes when he mentioned his sister, the one who'd needed help, the one nobody stopped the coach for. I'm sorry, Mara said. About your sister. Yeah, me too. He cleared his throat, sat straighter in the saddle. But that's old grief. Right now, we've got practical matters. Tom's coming with the wagon. Ranch is about 2 hours from here. We'll get there around sunset, get you settled, and tomorrow we can start figuring out this partnership. Mara nodded because she couldn't quite trust her voice. The wagon rumbled up, an older man at the reins, weathered as old leather, with sharp blue eyes that studied Mara with frank curiosity. Tom Fletcher, this is Mara Densley. She's our new business partner. Tom's eyebrows rose almost to his hairline. That's so. That's so. Miss Densley, Tom's been with me since I bought the ranch. Best horseman in 3 counties, and the only person I trust to tell me when I'm being an idiot. Which is often, Tom said mildly. He climbed down, offered Mara his hand to help her into the wagon. Welcome aboard, Miss Densley. Fair warning, Caleb's definition of business partner probably involves a lot more actual work than you're expecting. I ran a print shop, Mara said, accepting his help up. I'm familiar with actual work. Tom's grin was sudden and transforming. Oh, I like her already. She's got spine. Noticed that myself, Caleb said. He was gathering his cattle, whistling them into a loose group. The animals started moving almost reluctantly, like students called in from recess. Mara sat in the wagon and watched the sun start its slow descent toward the horizon. The land rolled out in all directions, grass and rock and sky, with no buildings to break the sight lines, no streets to channel the wind. It was beautiful and terrifying and so completely unlike Boston that for a moment she couldn't quite believe any of this was real. You all right, miss? Tom asked quietly. Was she? She'd just abandoned the only plan she'd had, burned every bridge back to her old life, and bet everything on a stranger's promise. She had no money, no spare clothes, no idea what she was doing, but she wasn't crying anymore. And she wasn't in that coach. I don't know, she admitted. Ask me again in a week. Tom chuckled. Fair enough. He snapped the reins gently, and the horses started forward. For what it's worth, Caleb's a good man. Terrible at paperwork, mind you. Absolute disaster. But he's honest, and he keeps his word. If he says you're partners, he means it. Why did he stop the coach? You'd have to ask him that. I did. He said it was because of his sister. Tom was quiet for a long moment. Sarah, she was, she was in a situation. Bad marriage. Husband was respectable on the outside, cruel behind closed doors. She tried to leave twice. Her family sent her back both times. Said her duty was to stay, make it work, be grateful she had a roof over her head. Mara's throat tightened. She died in childbirth, Tom continued, but Caleb always said it wasn't the childbirth that killed her. It was the slow suffocation of having no choices, no help, no way out. After that, well, he's got a soft spot for women in tight corners. Can't stand seeing someone get forced into something they don't want. So he just stops coaches and offers jobs? First time for that particular approach, Tom admitted. Usually he's more subtle, but I reckon he saw something in you that reminded him of Sarah, and he decided he wasn't going to let it happen again if he could help it. Mara looked back. The road behind them was empty now, the dust settling. Somewhere in the distance, the stagecoach was rolling toward Uncle Gideon's house, and by tomorrow morning he'd know she was gone. She should be terrified. She was terrified. But underneath the terror was something else. Something that felt almost like the first full breath she'd taken since her father died. What's the ranch like? She asked. Tom's expression shifted into something almost proud. Rough, beautiful, lot of work, house is solid. Caleb built most of it himself. Got good water, decent grazing. Could be something really special with proper management. And the paperwork situation? Absolute disaster, Tom said cheerfully. I love that boy like a son, but he can barely read his own handwriting. Got contracts he doesn't understand, debts he can't track, land surveys that might as well be written in French. Been telling him for months he needs help. Just didn't expect him to find it by blockading a stagecoach. Despite everything, Mara laughed. Neither did I. They rode in silence for a while. The sun dropped lower, painting the grass gold and amber. Caleb moved around his cattle like he was part of them, guiding them with whistles and hand signals. No wasted motion, no wasted words. Just quiet competence born of years doing something he understood in his bones. Could she learn to understand business that way? Could she take whatever mess he'd gotten himself into and turn it into something manageable? She'd done it before. The print shop had been chaos when her father got sick. Bills unpaid, contracts unsigned, customers angry about missed deadlines. She'd sorted it out, tracked every penny, renegotiated every contract, built systems where there'd been only confusion, and then lost it all anyway. But maybe that was the point. She'd lost it in Boston. She'd lost everything that tied her to that life. So what did she have to lose by trying again here, where the sky was bigger and the rules felt less rigid, and a cowboy could stop a coach just because a stranger was crying? "Tom," she said, "can I ask you something?" "Shoot." "Do you really think this can work? A partnership between me and Caleb?" Tom considered the question seriously. "Honestly, I don't know. Never seen Caleb work with a partner before. He's used to doing everything himself, even the things he's terrible at, and I don't know you well enough to say if you're as good at business as you claim." "That's not very reassuring. But," Tom continued, "I know Caleb wouldn't have made the offer if he didn't mean it. And I know he's desperate enough to try something different. So yeah, I think it can work. If you're both willing to be honest and do the work and not expect it to be easy." "I don't expect easy," Mara said. "I just expect a choice." Tom smiled. "Then you're already ahead of most people." The sun touched the horizon. The cattle lowed softly. The wagon wheels creaked and rattled over the uneven ground, and Mara Densley rode west into her brand new, uncertain, terrifying, and completely unchosen for her future, with $30 a month and a partnership contract she hadn't even signed yet. It was the best deal she'd ever made. The ranch appeared as the last light was fading, a cluster of buildings nestled in a valley where a creek cut through grassland like a silver thread. From a distance, it looked almost like a drawing. Main house, barn, a few outbuildings, corrals dark against the dimming sky. Mara's new life was about to begin. And somewhere behind her, in a house she'd never reach, a wedding dress hung empty, waiting for a bride who would never arrive. The house was smaller than Mara expected and bigger than she feared. 2 stories, wood frame, with a porch that wrapped around 3 sides and windows that caught the last purple light of dusk. Not grand, but solid. Built by someone who understood that out here, solid mattered more than beautiful. Tom pulled the wagon up to the front steps and set the brake. "Home sweet home." Caleb had already dismounted and was tying his horse to the rail. "I'll show you your room, get you settled. We can talk business tomorrow when we're both thinking straight." Mara climbed down, her legs unsteady after 2 hours of wagon jolts. The evening air was cooler than she'd expected, carrying the smell of grass and animals and wood smoke. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called, a sound she'd never heard before, lonely and wild and impossibly far from any Boston street. "This way." Caleb held the door open. She stepped inside. The front room was spare but clean, a stone fireplace, a few chairs that didn't match, a table scarred by years of use, books stacked on every available surface, some open, some marked with scraps of paper, a rifle mounted above the mantel, a clock that ticked too loud in the silence, and papers, everywhere, covering the table, spilling from boxes in the corners, pinned to the walls with what looked like nails and desperate hope. "Told you it was bad," Caleb said, following her gaze. Mara walked to the table, picked up the nearest document. It was a contract for cattle purchase, dated 3 months ago, with terms that made her wince. "You agreed to this pricing?" "I agreed to get cattle delivered." "Why? What's wrong with it?" "You're paying 20% above market rate, and you're responsible for transportation costs, which the seller should be covering. And there's a clause here that says if delivery is delayed for any reason, you still pay the full amount even if the cattle die in transit." Caleb's face went carefully blank. "Is that bad?" "It's theft disguised as commerce." Mara set the paper down, picked up another. A land survey, dense with legal language. "And this?" "Some dispute about property lines. My neighbor says I'm using his water rights." "Are you?" "Don't know. Can't make sense of the survey to tell where my land ends and his begins." Mara studied the document. It took her 3 minutes to find the relevant clause. "You have rights to the creek up to the cottonwood grove. Your neighbor has rights from the grove eastward." "Where's the grove?" "About 200 yards from the house." Then you're fine. The water you're using is legally yours. She set that paper down too, looked at the chaos surrounding them. How long has this been going on? Since I bought the place 2 years ago. Oh, Caleb ran a hand through his hair. I can work land. I know cattle and horses and weather. But this, he gestured at the papers, might as well be Greek. Tom keeps telling me to hire someone, but I kept putting it off. Didn't want to admit I needed help, I guess. Stupid pride. Not stupid, Mara said quietly. Just expensive. He laughed, short and sharp. That's one word for it. A door opened at the back of the house. Caleb, that you? Yeah, Marcus, come meet our new partner. The man who emerged from the kitchen was younger than Tom, maybe mid-20s, with dark skin and darker eyes that assessed Mara with the kind of careful neutrality she recognized from Boston's business district. The look of someone who'd learned not to trust first impressions. Marcus Webb, Mara Densley. Marcus handles the horses and about half the actual thinking that keeps this place running. Marcus nodded. Ma'am, Caleb mentioned what kind of partner you are exactly. Business manager, Mara said. Apparently someone needs to keep him from signing contracts that amount to legalized robbery. Marcus's expression shifted into something that might have been respect. Well, He caught himself. About time. Tom and I have been watching him bleed money for months. I'm standing right here, Caleb said mildly. And we love you anyway, Marcus replied. Even if you can't read worth a damn. I can read fine. I just can't interpret. Same thing when it comes to contracts. Marcus looked at Mara. You need anything, ma'am? I was just making supper. Nothing fancy, but there's plenty. Mara's stomach reminded her she hadn't eaten since dawn. That would be wonderful, thank you. Give me 10 minutes. Marcus disappeared back into the kitchen. Caleb gestured toward the stairs. Your room's this way. Like I said, it was Sarah's, but it's all right, Mara said. I appreciate having a space. She followed him up the narrow staircase. The second floor had 3 doors, all closed. Caleb opened the one at the end of the hall. The room was small. A bed, a washstand, a window that looked west toward the last streak of red sky, a trunk at the foot of the bed, a rag rug on the wooden floor, simple, clean, empty of personality, like someone had carefully removed all evidence of the person who'd lived there before. Clothes are in the trunk, Caleb said. Take what fits, leave what doesn't. There's water in the pitcher. Outhouse is behind the barn. I'll show you in the morning. If you need anything tonight, my room's the first door on the left. Mara nodded, suddenly aware of how close they were standing in the small space. Close enough to see the dust in his shirt creases, the sun-weathered lines around his eyes, the careful way he was not looking directly at her. Caleb, she said, why did you really stop that coach? He was quiet for a long moment. When he finally looked at her, his expression was unguarded in a way it hadn't been before. Told you already, you reminded me of Sarah. But you don't know me. You don't know if I'm anything like your sister. For all you know, I could be running from crimes. Could be a terrible person who deserves exactly what my uncle arranged. Are you? No, but you didn't know that when you stopped the coach. Caleb leaned against the door frame. You want the honest answer? Please. I saw you crying in that window, and I saw how your escort looked at you, like you were cargo instead of a person. And I thought about Sarah stuck in a house with a man who saw her the same way. And I thought about all the people who could have helped her but didn't because it wasn't their business, wasn't their problem, wasn't worth the trouble. He paused. And I decided that maybe if I helped you, it would somehow balance the scales, make up for the fact that nobody helped her. That's not how scales work, Mara said gently. I know, but it's the best I've got. They stood there in the doorway, 2 strangers bound by a handshake and a shared understanding of what it meant to have no choices. Thank you, Mara said finally, for stopping, for offering, for all of it. Caleb straightened, stepped back into the hallway. Thank me when we see if this partnership actually works. Right now we're both just hoping we didn't make a huge mistake. He smiled, quick and genuine. Get some rest. Tomorrow's going to be long. He closed the door, and Mara was alone. She sat on the bed. It creaked but held. and looked around her new room, her new life. The enormity of it settled over her like a weight. 24 hours ago, she'd been in a coach heading toward a wedding she didn't want. Now she was in a ranch house in the middle of nowhere, with $30 a month and a partnership she didn't fully understand with a man she'd just met. It was insane. It was terrifying. It was the first decision she'd made for herself in months. She opened the trunk. Inside were dresses, carefully folded, simple cotton work dresses in blues and browns, a nicer dress in green that looked barely worn, undergarments, a shawl, all of it eerily close to Mara's size. She touched the green dress, and something ached in her chest. This had belonged to someone who'd folded it carefully, maybe planning to wear it again, someone who'd run out of time. Tomorrow, Mara would wear a dead woman's clothes and try to save a drowning ranch and figure out how to build a life from nothing. But tonight, she was just tired. She changed into a nightgown from the trunk, washed her face in the basin, and lay down on the narrow bed. Through the open window, she could hear night sounds, crickets, the distant low of cattle, wind and grass, that coyote calling again. No carriages, no street vendors, no church bells marking the hours, just space and silence and the overwhelming weight of her own choices. She fell asleep wondering if she'd made the right one. Morning came hard and early. Someone was pounding on her door while the sky was still more gray than blue. "Miss Densley? Breakfast in 10 minutes if you want it." Mara jolted upright, disoriented. The room was unfamiliar, the light was wrong, and for a terrible moment she couldn't remember where she was or how she'd gotten there. Then memory crashed back. The coach. Caleb. The partnership. The fact that she'd just blown up her entire life on a stranger's promise. "I'll be right there," she called, her voice rough with sleep. She dressed quickly in one of Sarah's work dresses, blue cotton, practical, slightly loose in the waist, but close enough. Splashed water on her face. Tried to do something with her hair and gave up, settling for a simple braid. When she came downstairs, the three men were already at the table. They looked up as she entered. Caleb with his coffee, Tom with what looked like a week-old newspaper, Marcus with a skillet full of eggs. "Morning," Caleb said. "Hope you slept?" "Better than I expected." Mara took the empty chair. "What time is it?" "Just past 5. "In the morning?" Tom grinned. "Cattle don't care about city hours, miss." Marcus slid a plate in front of her. Eggs, bacon, bread that was probably from yesterday but still edible. "Eat up. Caleb's planning to put you to work." "Already?" Mara picked up her fork. "No time like the present," Caleb said. "Figured we'd start with inventory. You need to know what we have before you can manage it." "Smart." Mara took a bite. The eggs were better than she expected. "What exactly do we have?" 63 head of cattle, give or take. 18 horses, though 5 of those are broke and working, the rest are various stages of wild. 300 acres, about 200 of it grazing land, the rest timber and creek. This house, the barn, 2 equipment sheds, the foreman's cabin. Caleb ticked items off on his fingers. Tools, tack, a wagon that needs a new axle, debts I can't fully calculate, and contracts I don't fully understand. "How much do you owe?" "That's where it gets fuzzy. I know I owe the feed supplier about $200. Maybe owe my neighbor Silas Crown for some fence repairs, but the amount keeps changing every time he mentions it. Definitely owe the bank $300 on the land purchase. Possibly owe a lawyer in town for some legal work, but I'm not sure if I already paid that or just meant to." Mara set down her fork. "You don't have books, ledgers, any kind of financial records?" "I have a box of receipts, some of them. Some of them. The ones I remembered to keep." Tom and Marcus exchanged glances. "Right," Mara said slowly. "So we're starting from scratch." "Basically, yes." She should be horrified, should be reconsidering this entire arrangement. Instead, she felt something that was almost like excitement, the same feeling she'd had when she first took over her father's chaotic shop and realized she could actually fix it. "I'll need paper," she said. "A lot of it. Ink, pens, a proper ledger if you have one." "I can get that in town," Caleb said. "And I'll need to see every contract, receipt, bill of sale, and legal document you have. Everything, even the ones you think don't matter." "That'll take a while." "I have time," Caleb smiled. "You say that now." After breakfast, Tom and Marcus headed out to work the cattle. Caleb led Mara to what he optimistically called his office, a corner of the barn that smelled like hay and saddle leather, with a makeshift desk built from planks and sawhorses. "I mostly use it for storage," he admitted, gesturing at the boxes stacked against the wall. "That's 2 years of paperwork. Roughly sorted by topic, though I use the term sorted loosely." Mara opened the first box. Inside was a jumble of papers, receipts, contracts, bills, letters, all mixed together with no apparent organization. Some were dated, some weren't. Some were signed, some had notes scribbled in margins, some were just fragments that looked like they'd been torn from larger documents. It was worse than she'd feared. It was also, strangely, exactly what she needed. "I'll start here," she said. "You go do ranch work. I'll call if I have questions." "You sure I can stay and—" "Caleb." She looked at him directly. "You hired me to handle this. Let me handle it." He held her gaze for a moment, then nodded. "Fair enough. I'll be in the north pasture if you need me." He left, and Mara was alone with 2 years of financial chaos. She rolled up her sleeves and got to work. By noon, she had a system. 3 piles: contracts, receipts, and correspondence. Within each pile, chronological order. Within that, categories emerging: cattle purchases, equipment, feed, legal matters, land issues. By mid-afternoon, patterns were starting to show, and they weren't good. Caleb returned around 4, dusty and tired, to find Mara surrounded by neat stacks of paper and a growing list of problems written in her careful script. "How bad?" he asked. "Sit down." He sat. Mara picked up her list. "You're being systematically cheated by at least 3 different suppliers. The cattle dealer I mentioned yesterday, a feed merchant who's been charging you for deliveries you never received, and an equipment supplier who sold you tools at twice the market rate and keeps billing you for maintenance on equipment you own outright." Caleb's jaw tightened. "You sure?" "I have receipts that show you paid for 15 tons of feed last winter. I also have inventory records that show you only received 10 tons. Either someone's stealing or someone's lying about delivery. Could be I miscounted. Could be. Or could be the merchant is betting you don't keep good records and won't notice the difference." She moved to the next item. "The equipment supplier is easier to prove. He sold you a hay rake for $80. I found a catalog in your correspondence that lists the same rake at $45, and you've been paying him $5 a month for upkeep, even though the rake doesn't need maintenance. It's just a metal frame and wheels." Caleb was very quiet. "There's more," Mara said gently. "Your neighbor, Silas Crown, he's been billing you incrementally for fence repairs. Started at $50, now it's up to $130. But I can't find any contract that specifies the original scope of work or the payment terms. It's just been accumulating. Crown said it was neighborly, said we'd settle up when the work was done." "And is the work done?" "Don't know. I haven't actually seen him repair any fences." Mara made a note. "We need to have a conversation with Mr. Crown." "He won't like that." "I imagine not. But we're not running a charity." She looked at the rest of her list. "The good news is, you're not as deeply in debt as you feared. Most of these inflated charges aren't legitimate. Once we challenge them and negotiate properly, you should be able to clear your actual debts within 6 months. Caleb stared at her. 6 months? I thought I was drowning." "You were, but only because you were standing in water that other people kept pouring on your head." She allowed herself a small smile. "Stop letting them pour, and you'll be fine." "Just like that?" "Not just like that. It'll take work. We need to renegotiate contracts, confront the cheaters, document everything properly going forward. And we need to be smart about it. Some of these people won't take kindly to being called out." "Especially Crown," Caleb said quietly. "He's influential around here, owns the biggest ranch in the county, has friends in the territorial government. If we accuse him of cheating, we don't accuse. We simply request documentation of the work completed and compare it to the charges. If there's a discrepancy, we discuss it professionally." Mara kept her voice level. "I've dealt with men like Crown before. They rely on intimidation and the assumption that people won't push back. But when confronted with facts and records, they usually back down." "Usually?" Often enough. Caleb was quiet for a long moment, studying her across the desk. You've done this before. Not just bookkeeping, this standing up to people who cheat. My father's print shop had some very creative customers when it came to payment. I learned early that being nice gets you nothing. Being professional and persistent gets you paid. And being a woman? That ever make it harder? Always. She said it without bitterness, just fact. But that's why documentation matters. Numbers don't care about your gender. Either the math works or it doesn't. Caleb smiled, slow and genuine. I think I made a very good decision yesterday. Ask me again in 6 months when we see if we're solvent. They worked until dark, going through contracts and building a strategy. Caleb filled in context, which suppliers were reasonable, which ones had always felt off, which debts he was certain of versus which ones kept shifting. Mara took notes, asked questions, and slowly built a picture of a ranch that could actually thrive if someone stopped bleeding it dry. We'll need to go to town, she said as they finished. Talk to some of these people in person. And I'll need to meet this lawyer you may be paid. Evan Pierce, he's good people, even if I can't remember if I settled his bill. We'll find out. Mara rubbed her eyes. How far is town? About 2 hours by wagon. We could go tomorrow if you're ready. I'm ready. Caleb hesitated. People are going to talk, about you, about us, about the fact that you're living here. Let them talk. It might hurt your reputation. My reputation died with my father's business. Right now, I'm more concerned with solving yours. She met his eyes. Unless this is you having second thoughts? No, just making sure you know what you're walking into. I walked away from a respectable marriage to work on a failing ranch with a man I just met. I think I've already made my position clear on what society thinks. His smile was quick and bright. Fair point. Dinner that night was quieter than breakfast. Tom was tired from a long day moving cattle. Marcus was working on a broken bridle, and Caleb seemed lost in thought. Mara ate quickly and excused herself, carrying an armload of contracts up to her room to review by lamplight. She worked until her eyes burned, making notes and calculations, building a case for each disputed debt. Outside, the night sounds continued, now familiar enough not to startle her, still strange enough to remind her how far she was from Boston. Somewhere in the distance, she heard hoofbeats, fast, urgent, then voices in the yard below. She set down her pen and went to the window. A rider had pulled up to the house, someone she didn't recognize, talking urgently to Caleb on the porch. Even from above, she could see the tension in Caleb's shoulders, the way he'd gone very still. The rider left. Caleb stood on the porch for a long moment, then went back inside. Mara waited, but he didn't come upstairs, didn't call for her. Whatever the news was, he was dealing with it alone. She went back to her contracts, but concentration was harder now. The next morning, Caleb was already gone when she came down for breakfast. Tom was at the table, looking grim. Where is he? Mara asked. North pasture. We lost 3 head last night. Lost how? Stolen, most like. Someone cut the fence and drove them off. Caleb's out tracking. Mara's stomach dropped. Does this happen often? First time this year. Tom's voice was carefully neutral. Might be coincidence. You don't believe that? No, ma'am, I don't. He looked at her directly. Word travels fast out here. People know you turned down your uncle's arrangement. Know you're working with Caleb now. Some folks won't like that. Which folks? The kind who think women should stay in their place and men shouldn't interfere with family business. Tom took a sip of coffee. Could be random theft. Could be someone sending a message. To Caleb? Or to me? Maybe both. Mara sat down slowly. What kind of message? That causing trouble has consequences. That disrupting the social order, even for good reasons, makes people nervous. That maybe if things get difficult enough, you'll reconsider and go back to where you came from. The coffee suddenly tasted bitter. Will Caleb be all right? Caleb's been handling trouble since before you got here. He'll be fine. Tom's expression softened. But you should know what you're up against. This isn't just about bookkeeping anymore. Someone's paying attention, and they don't like what they see. Caleb returned around midday, empty-handed and furious. The cattle were gone, the trail cold, no way to prove who'd taken them or where they'd gone. I'm sorry, Mara said when he came into the barn office where she was working. Not your fault. Isn't it? Tom said this might be about me, about the choice I made. Caleb's expression was hard. If it is, that makes it about the kind of people who think they can punish a woman for making her own decisions, not about you. Either way, you lost 3 head. That's money you can't afford to lose. No. He sat down heavily. But it's done. We move forward. They went to town that afternoon, Caleb driving the wagon while Mara went over her notes. The settlement was bigger than she'd expected, maybe 50 buildings scattered along a main street, with cross streets branching off like roots. General store, saloon, hotel, livery, a few houses. The territorial courthouse sat at one end, imposing stone in a town of wood. People stared as they passed. Mara felt the weight of their attention, heard the whispers that followed the wagon. Ignore them, Caleb said quietly. I'm used to it. They stopped first at the lawyer's office. Evan Pierce turned out to be younger than Mara expected, maybe 40, with the lean build of someone who'd worked outdoors before he'd worked indoors, and eyes that missed nothing. Caleb, good to see you. He shook hands, then turned to Mara. And you must be the new business partner I've been hearing about. News travels fast, Mara said. In a town this size? You sneezed in Boston, and we probably heard it. He gestured them to chairs. What can I do for you? I need to know if I paid you, Caleb said bluntly. Evan's eyebrows rose. For what work? The land dispute last spring, and maybe some contract review? I honestly can't remember. You paid half, $50, still owe me $30. Caleb looked at Mara, who made a note. We'll settle that today, she said. I'm putting together comprehensive books. I need to know every legitimate debt. Legitimate, Evan repeated. Interesting word choice. We're discovering some of Caleb's creditors have been creative with their accounting. Anyone I should know about? Mara glanced at Caleb, who nodded. The feed merchant, the equipment supplier, and possibly Silas Crown. Evan's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Be very careful with Crown. Why? Mara asked. Because he owns half the county and has aspirations to own the other half. Because he's got friends in the territorial legislature. Because men who cross him have a tendency to find their businesses failing, their loans called in, their reputations destroyed. Evan leaned forward. I'm not saying don't challenge him. I'm saying document everything, keep witnesses, and don't do anything that could be twisted into slander. We're just asking for proof of work completed, Mara said. With Crown, there's no such thing as just asking. Everything's a power play. He looked at Caleb. He know you're questioning his charges? Not yet. He will soon. And when he does, expect pushback. Evan drummed his fingers on the desk. You might want to settle your other disputes first. Build up some goodwill in town, establish that you're reasonable people asking reasonable questions. That way when Crown comes at you, you'll have allies. It was good advice. Mara added it to her notes. Thank you. One more thing. Evan's voice dropped. I heard about your cattle. Word really does travel, Caleb said dryly. I also heard some speculation about why it happened and who might be behind it. And nothing I can prove or repeat. Just watch yourselves. Both of you. They left the lawyer's office and headed to the feed merchant next. That conversation went better. The man blustered and denied, and eventually, when confronted with receipts and delivery records, admitted to some accounting errors and agreed to credit Caleb's account for the missing deliveries. The equipment supplier was harder. He refused to negotiate, called Mara uppity, and suggested Caleb should control his hired help better. They left with nothing resolved and Mara's temper barely in check. That's what I meant about being a woman making it harder, she said as they walked back to the wagon. He's a cheating bastard, Caleb said flatly. Has nothing to do with you being a woman and everything to do with him being caught. Still doesn't solve the problem. We'll solve it differently. I'll stop buying from him, spread the word about his prices, let the market handle it. It wasn't as satisfying as forcing him to admit the fraud, but it was practical. Mara made another note. They were loading supplies into the wagon when a man approached, tall, well-dressed, with silver hair and the kind of confident smile that probably worked on most people. Caleb Holt. Haven't seen you in town in a while. Caleb's expression went carefully neutral. Crown. So this was Silas Crown. Mara studied him with new attention. He looked respectable, successful, every inch the prosperous rancher. He also looked at her the way her uncle's associates used to look at the print shop, like he was calculating its value and finding it wanting. And you must be Miss Densley. Crown's smile widened. I've heard quite a bit about you. Have you? Mara kept her voice level. Town's abuzz with the story. Young woman fleeing an arranged marriage, taking up with a struggling rancher. Very romantic. The way he said it made it sound cheap. I'm working, not taking up, Mara said. Business partnership. Of course. Of course. Crown's tone suggested he didn't believe a word. Still, must be quite an adjustment. Ranch work is very different from city life. I'm managing. Good, good. Though I have to wonder how long you'll last. This country can be hard on people who aren't suited for it. He turned to Caleb. Speaking of business, I wanted to discuss those fence repairs. I've got the final tally ready for you. How much? Caleb asked. $175. More than we initially discussed, but the work expanded. You know how these things go. Mara stepped forward. I'd like to see documentation of the expanded work. Invoices for materials, time logs for labor. Crown's smile thinned. I beg your pardon? Standard business practice. Before we pay for work, we verify what was completed. Are you questioning my honesty? I'm requesting documentation. There's a difference. They stared at each other. The street had gone quiet, people stopping to watch, sensing conflict. Miss Densley, Crown said softly, I don't know how things work in Boston, but out here, a man's word is his bond. Asking for documentation suggests you don't trust that word. I trust numbers, Mara said. They're more reliable than words. Crown's expression hardened. Caleb, I suggest you teach your employee some manners. She's not my employee, Caleb said. She's my partner, and she's right to ask for proof of work. The temperature dropped 10 degrees. I see. Crown's voice was ice. Well then, I'll have my bookkeeper prepare a full accounting. You can review it at your leisure. Though I should mention, these sorts of requests tend to slow down neighborly cooperation. Might be harder to get help from folks around here if you insist on treating friends like criminals. We're treating everyone the same, Mara said. Professional and fair. Professional. Crown tasted the word like poison. How admirably modern of you. He tipped his hat. Good day, Miss Densley. Caleb. I'll be in touch. He walked away, and the street slowly came back to life. Well, Caleb said quietly, that could have gone better. Or worse. He didn't shoot us. Give him time. They finished loading supplies and headed back to the ranch in silence. But as they left town, Mara noticed something. People were watching them go. And one man in particular, Crown's foreman, if she had to guess, was staring with an expression that made her skin crawl. Caleb, she said, we should be careful. Already planning on it. No, I mean really careful. That man outside the saloon, the way he was looking at us. Caleb glanced back, but the street was already disappearing behind them. Crown's not the type to do his own dirty work. He'll use proxies, make things look like accidents or bad luck. Like stolen cattle? Like stolen cattle. They rode in silence for a while, the afternoon sun beating down, the land rolling past in shades of gold and brown. Are you having second thoughts? Caleb asked finally. About the partnership? Mara considered the question honestly. 24 hours ago, she'd been excited about fixing the books. Now she was caught in what looked like the beginning of a range war with a powerful man who didn't like being questioned. But she was also not in a coach heading toward a forced marriage, was not trapped in her uncle's house, was not being shaped into someone else's vision of who she should be. No, she said. Are you? No. He smiled slightly, though I'm starting to think my life was quieter before you showed up. Quieter, but more expensive. True enough. The ranch appeared on the horizon. Home, Mara caught herself thinking, then corrected it. Not home. Just a place she was working, a temporary arrangement until she figured out what came next. But as they pulled into the yard and Tom came out to help with the supplies, and Marcus called from the barn that dinner would be ready soon, Mara felt something she hadn't felt in months. Not safety, exactly. Not security, but possibility. The sense that maybe, just maybe, she could build something here. Something that was hers. Something that couldn't be taken away by creditors or uncles or men who thought women were cargo. That night, after another meal and more contract review, Mara stood on the porch and looked out at the dark land. Somewhere out there, Silas Crown was plotting. Somewhere, her Uncle Gideon was furious. Somewhere, 3 stolen cattle represented a warning she couldn't ignore. But here, in this moment, she was free. And tomorrow, she'd start fighting to stay that way. The weeks that followed fell into a rhythm that felt almost normal. Mara rose with the sun, worked through ledgers and contracts until her eyes ached, and slowly transformed 2 years of chaos into something that resembled actual business records. Caleb worked the land with Tom and Marcus, fixing fences and rotating cattle, and doing the 100 small tasks that kept a ranch alive. In the evenings, they'd compare notes over dinner, Mara explaining what she'd discovered, Caleb providing context she couldn't get from papers alone. They were making progress. Real progress. 3 disputed debts resolved, 2 new contracts negotiated at fair prices, 1 complete accounting system built from scratch. The ranch was still struggling, but it was no longer drowning. And then Mara went to town alone. It was a Tuesday, 3 weeks after her arrival. Caleb needed to stay back for a difficult calving, and Mara needed supplies, more paper, ink, a proper ledger book instead of the makeshift journal she'd been using. Simple enough. Tom offered to drive her, but she insisted she could manage. The wagon wasn't complicated and the road was clear. She should have accepted his offer. The general store was busy when she arrived, full of ranch wives doing their weekly shopping. Conversation died the moment she walked in. Women who'd been laughing together suddenly found their shopping lists fascinating. The shopkeeper's smile was professional but cold. "Help you, miss?" "I need supplies." Mara handed over her list, kept her voice level. He read it without comment, started gathering items. Around her, the whispers started, just loud enough for her to hear, just quiet enough to claim innocence if confronted. Shameful is what it is. Living out there with 3 unmarried men, no chaperone, no propriety. I heard she ran away from a respectable marriage. Can you imagine? Gideon Rourke's niece, too. Such a good family. What a disappointment. Mara kept her eyes on the counter, her face carefully blank. She'd heard worse in Boston. She could survive this. The shopkeeper returned with her supplies, named a price that was twice what it should be. "That's not correct," Mara said quietly. "Prices went up." "Since yesterday?" "Supply and demand, miss. Take it or leave it." She took it, paid with money she couldn't afford to waste, carried her packages out to the wagon while the whispers followed like wasps. She was loading the supplies when a woman approached, middle-aged, stern-faced, with the kind of expression that suggested she'd appointed herself guardian of public morality. "Miss Densley." "Yes?" "I'm Mrs. Catherine Moore, president of the Ladies' Improvement Society." She said it like the words themselves conveyed authority. "I wanted to speak with you about your situation." "My employment, you mean?" "Your living arrangement." Mrs. Moore's mouth pursed. "It's inappropriate for a young unmarried woman to reside in a household with unmarried men. Surely you understand how this appears." "I'm working," Mara said, "managing business accounts. The same work any male bookkeeper would do." A male bookkeeper wouldn't be living under the same roof as his employer. Many do, actually. Live-in help is quite common. Not unmarried female help. Mrs. Moore stepped closer, lowered her voice. "I'm trying to help you, Miss Densley. Your reputation is being destroyed. No decent man will marry you after this. If you just return to your uncle's care, accept the marriage he arranged." "I don't want that marriage." "What you want is irrelevant. You have a duty to your family, to society, to maintain proper standards of behavior." Her voice hardened. "If you continue this reckless path, you'll find yourself completely ostracized. No one will trade with you. No one will help you. You'll be utterly alone." Mara looked at her directly. "I'm already alone, Mrs. Moore. Have been since my father died. The difference is now I'm alone by choice, doing work I'm good at, earning my own way. That's worth more to me than your society's approval." Mrs. Moore's face flushed. "You'll regret this defiance." Perhaps, but it'll be my regret, not someone else's. She climbed into the wagon and drove away, hands shaking on the reins. Behind her, she could feel the town's judgment like a physical weight. By the time she got back to the ranch, her carefully maintained composure had cracked. She unhitched the wagon with jerky, angry movements, carried the supplies inside, and found Caleb in the barn office reviewing the contracts she'd organized. "How was town?" he asked without looking up. "Expensive. The shopkeeper doubled his prices for me." Now Caleb looked up. "What?" "Said prices went up. Coincidentally, right when I walked in." She set the packages down harder than necessary. "Also, I'm apparently destroying civilization by working here. Mrs. Catherine Moore was kind enough to inform me." Caleb's expression went dark. "What did she say?" "The usual. I'm improper, immoral, ruining my reputation. Should go back to my uncle, accept my place, stop causing trouble." Mara laughed bitterly. "Funny how my place is always wherever someone else thinks I should be." "I'm sorry." "Don't be. It's not your fault people are small-minded." She started unpacking supplies, needing something to do with her hands. Though she did make one good point. This situation, me living here, it does look questionable. Maybe I should take the foreman's cabin after all. Put some distance between... No. The word was flat, final. "Caleb?" "No," he repeated. "You're not getting pushed out of the main house because gossips have nothing better to do than speculate about other people's business. You're a partner, not a hired girl. You sleep where partners sleep." "It might make things easier." "For who? For them? For people who want you to fail so they can say they were right about you?" He stood, walked over to where she was standing. "You want to move to the cabin for your own comfort? Fine. But you're not moving because Catherine Moore and her improvement society think you should know your place." Mara felt something tight in her chest loosen slightly. "You're very certain about this?" "I'm certain that if we start letting other people's opinions dictate how we run this ranch, we might as well hand them the deed now." His voice softened. "You're doing good work here, Mara. Real work that's saving this place. Don't let anyone make you feel ashamed of that." She nodded, not trusting her voice. "And tomorrow," Caleb added, "I'm going into town with you. We're going to have a conversation with that shopkeeper about his pricing policies." "That'll just make things worse." Maybe. Or maybe people need to understand that treating my partner poorly is the same as treating me poorly. And I don't do business with people who disrespect my associates." It was the most she'd heard him say it once since they'd met. And underneath the words, she heard something else. The same thing she'd heard in his voice when he stopped the coach. The absolute unwillingness to stand by while someone got hurt just because it was easier than causing trouble. "Thank you," she said quietly. "Don't thank me. Just keep fixing my disaster of a business. That's thanks enough." But the town's hostility was only the beginning of their problems. That night, another fence got cut. This time, no cattle were taken, just the fence itself destroyed, hundreds of feet of wire and posts torn down, leaving Caleb's herd vulnerable to wandering onto neighboring land or into ravines. Tom found it at dawn. "It's not random," he said, showing Caleb and Mara the damage. "Look at the cuts, clean, deliberate. Someone spent hours doing this." "Who?" Mara asked, though she already suspected the answer. "Could be anyone," Tom said carefully. "Could be folks who think Caleb shouldn't have interfered with your uncle's plans. Could be folks who don't like seeing a woman in business. Could be Silas Crown sending a message about those fence repair charges we questioned." "Could be all of that," Caleb said. His voice was calm, but his hands were clenched. "Doesn't matter who. What matters is we fix it and watch closer." They spent 2 days repairing the fence. Mara helped where she could, learning to string wire and hammer posts even though her hands blistered and her back ached. It felt important somehow, to prove she wasn't just good with numbers, that she could do the hard physical work too. On the 3rd day, a letter arrived. The writer who delivered it was a stranger, hired courier probably, paid to bring messages and ask no questions. He handed the envelope to Mara, tipped his hat, and rode off before she could ask where it came from. She knew the handwriting on the envelope, had seen it on letters her entire life, always giving instructions, always certain of its authority. "Uncle Gideon." She opened it with shaking hands. The letter was brief and brutal. He was disappointed in her defiance, ashamed of her behavior. had tried to be understanding, had given her time to come to her senses, but clearly she was incapable of making rational decisions. Therefore, he was coming to collect her personally. Would arrive in 1 week. Had already made arrangements with the local authorities to ensure she returned with him, willing or not. The marriage to Howard Blackwell was rescheduled. She would comply, or he would pursue legal action against Caleb Holt for kidnapping and corruption of a minor dependent. Never mind that she wasn't a minor. Never mind that she'd left the coach voluntarily. Uncle Gideon had lawyers and connections and the absolute certainty that he was right. Mara read the letter twice, then handed it to Caleb without a word. He read it slowly, his expression growing darker with each line. When he finished, he looked up at her. "You're not going. He'll make trouble. He'll sue you, ruin you. Let him try." Caleb's voice was hard. "You're an adult. You left voluntarily. We have witnesses. He has no legal ground." "Legal ground doesn't matter when you have enough money for lawyers." Mara's hands were trembling. "He'll bury you in court costs even if he can't win. He'll ruin your reputation, drive away your business, make sure no one in town trades with you, and he'll do it all while claiming he's just a concerned uncle protecting his wayward niece." So we fight back. With what? We're barely solvent. We can't afford a legal battle with Gideon Rourke. Caleb was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, "There might be another way." "What way?" "You could marry me." The words hung in the air between them like smoke. Mara stared at him. "What?" "Think about it. If you're married, your uncle has no claim. Can't force you into another marriage. Can't argue you need his guardianship. You'd be legally independent." He said it practically, like discussing a business transaction. "We could make it a legal arrangement, on paper only, separate rooms, separate lives, just protection." "That's insane." "Maybe. But it would work." Mara's mind was racing. It would work. A married woman was her husband's responsibility, not her uncle's. Gideon couldn't force her into anything once she had a legal husband. But it was also completely mad. She'd fled one arranged marriage only to propose entering another, even if this one came with different terms. "I can't ask you to do that," she said finally. "You're not asking. I'm offering." Caleb's expression was serious. "Look, I know it's not romantic or conventional, or probably even smart, but it's practical. Solves your uncle problem, protects the ranch from his legal threats, and doesn't change anything about how we're actually living. It changes everything. Marriage is—" "A legal contract," Caleb interrupted. "And you're good at contracts. We write it up proper, specify the terms, make it clear this is a business arrangement, not a traditional marriage. You keep your independence, your wages, your right to leave whenever you want. I get a business partner who can't be forced to abandon the work we've started." It made terrible, perfect sense, and it made Mara want to scream. "I need to think," she said. "Take your time. We have a week." She spent that week trying to think of alternatives. Could they fight Gideon in court? Maybe, but the cost would destroy everything they'd built. Could she run again? Where? With what money? She'd be right back where she started, broke, desperate, with nowhere to go. The marriage offer sat between them like an unexploded bomb, never mentioned, but always present. And then, 5 days before Gideon's promised arrival, Mara went back to town for supplies. She'd learned her lesson from last time. Went early, before the church crowd finished their weekday services. Brought Tom for company and protection. Planned to be quick and gone before trouble found her. But trouble was waiting anyway. Silas Crown caught her outside the general store, his smile all teeth and no warmth. "Miss Densley." "Just the person I wanted to see." Mara's hand tightened on her packages. "Mr. Crown." "I've been thinking about our last conversation, about your request for documentation of my fence work." He stepped closer, crowding her against the wagon. "And I've realized something. You're absolutely right to ask for proof. In fact, I should be more businesslike in all my dealings." "I appreciate that." "So businesslike that I'm calling in all debts immediately, including the $175 Caleb owes me for fence repairs. Payment due in full by the end of the month." Mara's blood went cold. "That's 3 weeks away. Plenty of time to arrange funds. We don't have that kind of cash on hand. We'd need to sell cattle, and the market's not my concern." Crown's smile widened. "You wanted professional business practices? Well, professionally speaking, I'm entitled to payment for work completed. If Caleb can't pay, I'll pursue legal remedies, starting with a lien on his property. You can't. I can. And I will. He tipped his hat. Unless, of course, you'd like to discuss alternative arrangements. The way he said it made Mara's skin crawl. What arrangements? Come work for me instead. I could use someone with your skills. My operation is much larger than Caleb's little ranch. More opportunity, better pay, actual security. His eyes traveled over her in a way that had nothing to do with bookkeeping. I take care of my people, Miss Densley. Very good care. Understanding hit like ice water. You're offering me a job, among other things. And if I refuse? Then Caleb's debt comes due. He defaults, I file for seizure of assets, and within 2 months his ranch belongs to me. You'll be out of work anyway. Might as well jump to the winning side now. Tom had appeared at her elbow, his hand resting casually on his belt near where a knife probably lived. Everything all right here, Miss Densley? Mr. Crown was just leaving, Mara said, her voice steadier than she felt. Crown's smile never wavered. Think about my offer. You have until the end of the month. After that, the opportunity expires along with Caleb's deed. He walked away, and Mara sagged against the wagon. What did he want? Tom asked quietly. To destroy us, one way or another. They drove back to the ranch in grim silence. Mara's mind was spinning, trying to find a solution that didn't involve losing everything or accepting Crown's offer, or the marriage. She found Caleb in the north pasture, checking on a pregnant mare. He took one look at her face and knew something was wrong. She told him everything. Crown's ultimatum, the payment deadline, the job offer that wasn't really about a job. Caleb listened without interrupting. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment. We could sell cattle, he said finally. Take the loss, pay him off. And be broke again, back where we started. Mara shook her head. He's not going to stop, Caleb. Even if we pay this debt, he'll find another way to pressure us. Another charge, another demand. He wants the ranch, and he wants me gone, and he won't quit until he gets both. Then we fight him. How? He's got money, power, connections. And we've got documentation. Caleb's voice was hard. You said his fence charges don't add up. Can you prove it? I can show the numbers don't make sense, but I can't prove fraud without seeing his actual records. So we get his records. How? Break into his office? If we have to. Mara stared at him. You're serious. He's trying to steal my ranch and harass you into his bed. Yes, I'm serious. The blunt words made Mara flinch, but she didn't deny them. Even if we found proof, he'd just claim we forged it. Not if we have witnesses. Not if we can show a pattern. Caleb started pacing. He's been doing this for years, right? Overcharging, inflating debts, pressuring people off their land. There have to be others, other ranchers he's squeezed, other people who couldn't fight back. Even if there are, why would they talk to us? They'd be risking the same treatment. Maybe. Or maybe they're tired of being afraid. He stopped pacing, looked at her directly. You asked how we fight someone with more power. We find allies. We build a case. We make enough noise that he can't silence us without looking guilty. It was desperate and probably wouldn't work and might get them both destroyed. It was also the only plan they had. All right, Mara said, but we do it smart. Document everything. Build the case properly. Make sure we have legal ground before we make accusations. Agreed. And in the meantime, she took a breath. I accept your offer. Caleb went very still. The marriage? Yes. If Gideon arrives and I'm already married, he loses his leverage. And if Crown tries to seize the ranch, having a legal wife might complicate his claim. It buys us time. Are you sure? No, but I'm out of better options. She met his eyes. On one condition, we write it down, everything, the terms, the boundaries, the exit clauses, make it a real contract, not just a promise. Caleb's mouth quirked. Still don't trust verbal agreements? I trust you. But I learned the hard way that even good people can have different memories of what was promised. I want it in writing. Fair enough. He extended his hand. Partners? She took it. Partners. They told Tom and Marcus that night over dinner. Tom took the news with surprising calm. just nodded and said it made sense given the circumstances. Marcus looked between them for a long moment, then said, "This is the strangest business arrangement I've ever seen, but I've seen worse marriages, so I guess it'll work." They planned to marry that weekend. Quick ceremony at the courthouse, legal and binding and utterly unromantic. Evan Pierce agreed to draw up the contract specifying terms. Mara wrote it all down in her neat bookkeeper's hand. Marriage in name only, separate finances except for ranch business, either party free to leave with 3 months' notice, no expectations of traditional marital duties. It read more like a corporate partnership than a wedding vow. It was the most honest marriage contract Mara had ever seen. The day before the wedding, another letter arrived. Not from Uncle Gideon this time. Mara opened it and felt the ground shift beneath her feet. It was from Crown, brief and poisonous. He knew about the planned marriage. Of course he knew. Nothing stayed secret in this town. And he wanted her to understand something very clearly. A married woman's debts became her husband's responsibility, and a married woman's property became her husband's property. So if she thought marrying Caleb would protect anything, she was mistaken. All it would do was give Crown legal grounds to seize everything, including her, when Caleb inevitably failed to pay what he owed. But there was more. The letter included a document, a lien filed 3 days ago with the Territorial Land Office, claiming Caleb owed Crown not $175, but $300, for fence repairs, equipment loans, and something called consultation fees that Mara had never seen documented anywhere. The lien gave Crown the right to seize Caleb's property if the debt wasn't paid within 30 days. They had been outmaneuvered. Mara showed the letter to Caleb, watched his face go white, then red, then settle into something harder than she'd ever seen. "He filed this before we even questioned the charges," Caleb said quietly. "Been planning this for weeks." "He's been planning it longer than that." Mara's hands were shaking. "The stolen cattle, the cut fences, the town turning against us. It's all been building to this. He's not just trying to take your ranch, he's destroying your ability to fight back first." "So what do we do?" Mara looked at the papers spread across the table. The lien, the marriage contract, her carefully organized ledgers showing every penny they had and every penny they owed. They couldn't pay the debt. Couldn't fight it legally, not fast enough, couldn't run. Crown would seize the property anyway, and then where would they be? "We find the proof," she said. "We find evidence he's been doing this to others. We find his records, and we expose him before he can foreclose. That gives us less than a month. Then we'd better work fast." But first, they had a wedding to attend. Because even if it solved nothing, even if Crown had already won, Mara would be damned if she let her uncle drag her back to Boston to marry Howard Blackwell. She'd choose her own cage, thank you very much. The wedding was Friday afternoon, in Evan Pierce's office with Tom and Marcus as witnesses. No flowers, no music, no pretense that this was anything but a legal transaction between two desperate people. The judge was elderly, skeptical, and clearly suspicious of the whole arrangement. "You understand this is a binding legal contract?" he asked Mara. "Not something you can simply walk away from when convenient?" "I understand," Mara said. "And you, Mr. Holt, you understand you're taking on full legal responsibility for your wife, her debts, her actions, her welfare?" "I understand." "Fine. Then by the power vested in me by the territorial government, I pronounce you husband and wife." He said it like pronouncing sentence. "You may kiss the bride, if you're so inclined." Caleb looked at Mara. Mara looked at Caleb. They shook hands instead. "Congratulations," the judge said dryly. "I give it 6 months." They walked out of the office as legal partners in marriage and business, bound together by documents and desperation and a shared determination not to let powerful men dictate their lives. The sun was setting as they drove back to the ranch. Neither spoke. The ring on Mara's finger, plain silver, bought that morning from the general store, felt heavy and foreign and like the world's most expensive mistake. "Regrets yet?" Caleb asked as they pulled into the yard. Mara looked at the house, the barn, the land rolling away toward distant hills. Looked at this life she'd built from nothing in less than a month. This partnership that had somehow become a marriage that still felt like a partnership. "Ask me again in 6 months," she said. She climbed down from the wagon and walked into the house that was now legally half hers, to sleep in a room separate from her legal husband and to plan how they were going to survive the next 30 days before everything they'd fought for got taken away. Behind them, the sun dropped below the horizon. And somewhere in his large house on his successful ranch, Silas Crown was probably smiling. The morning after the wedding, Mara woke to the sound of hammering. She dressed quickly in one of Sarah's work dresses. She still thought of them that way, even after a month of wearing them, and went downstairs to find the house empty and the hammering coming from outside. Caleb was reinforcing the barn door, adding a heavy crossbar that could be locked from inside. Tom was doing the same to the equipment shed. Marcus had his rifle propped against the fence while he worked on the corral gate. They were preparing for a siege. "Good morning, Mrs. Holt," Tom said when he saw her. He said it without irony, just stating fact. Mrs. Holt. The name felt like a costume she hadn't quite learned to wear yet. "What's all this?" she asked. "Security," Caleb said, not looking up from his work. "If Crown's going to make a move, I want to make it harder for him." "You think he'll come here? Physically?" "I think he'll do whatever he thinks he can get away with." Caleb drove another nail home with more force than necessary. "And I'm done making things easy for people who want to hurt us." Mara understood the sentiment, but she also understood that locked doors wouldn't stop illegal foreclosure. "I need to go to the land office," she said. "See the lien filing for myself. There might be something in the paperwork we can challenge." Caleb finally looked up. "You're not going alone." "I can handle—" "I know you can, but you're not going alone." His voice was firm. Crown made his intentions clear. "I'm not giving him opportunities." So they went together, riding into town in the wagon with Marcus following on horseback. The extra protection felt both necessary and absurd. Like admitting they were at war while still pretending everything was normal. The land office was a cramped building attached to the courthouse, staffed by a clerk who looked like he'd been there since the territory was founded. He produced the lien filing without comment, probably because he'd already heard every piece of gossip about the Holt's shotgun wedding and didn't need to add his own speculation. Mara studied the document carefully. The charges were listed: fence repairs, equipment loans, consultation fees. The total was $300. The filing date was 3 weeks ago, before they'd even questioned Crown's original charges. "This is fraud," she said quietly. "Probably," the clerk agreed. "But it's legal fraud, filed properly, witnessed, signed. Even if the underlying debt is questionable, the lien itself is valid." "So what can we do?" "Pay it, challenge it in court, or lose the property when the deadline passes." He said it without sympathy. "Those are your options." Outside, Mara showed the document to Caleb. "He's been planning this for months. Filed the lien before we even knew there was a problem. We can't fight this the normal way." "Then we fight it the abnormal way." Caleb's jaw was tight. "We find proof he's lying, real proof, not just suspicions." "How?" "His records are at his ranch. We can't just walk in and demand to see his books." "No, but we might know someone who can." It took Mara a moment to understand. "You want to break into his office?" "I want to find the truth. If that requires some creative interpretation of property rights, so be it. That's illegal. So is filing false liens. At least our version gets us evidence." He looked at her directly. "I'm not asking you to be part of it. This is my fight, my risk, but I'm going to do it." Mara should have argued, should have pointed out that getting caught would destroy any chance they had of fighting Crown legally, should have insisted they find another way. Instead, she said, "When?" They spent the next week planning. Tom knew Crown's ranch layout from years of working the territory, where the house sat, where the office was, when staff would be present. Marcus knew Crown's schedule. He went to town every Saturday for a regular poker game that lasted until midnight. The break-in would have to be Saturday night, and it would have to be Mara who did it. "No," Caleb said immediately when she proposed it. "Absolutely not. It has to be me. I'm the only one who knows what to look for in business records. You could spend an hour searching and never find the right documents. Then I'll learn what to look for." "In 3 days? I've been doing this for years, Caleb. I can spot doctored books and false entries faster than you can read the ledger headers. If you get caught, then I'm caught, but at least we tried." They argued for an hour. Tom and Marcus stayed carefully neutral, watching the debate like a tennis match. Finally, Caleb threw up his hands in frustration. "Fine. but I'm going with you. You search, I'll watch for trouble. That doubles the risk of being caught, and doubles the chance of getting out alive if something goes wrong. We do this together, or we don't do it at all. It wasn't a suggestion. It was the same tone he'd used when he stopped the coach. The voice of a man who'd already decided and wouldn't be moved. Mara recognized when she'd lost an argument. Together, then. Saturday came too fast and too slow. Mara spent the morning reviewing ranch accounts to keep her hands busy, but her mind kept drifting to the night ahead. Breaking and entering. Theft, technically, even if they were only stealing information. Crimes that could land them both in jail if caught. She was terrified. She was also grimly determined. Crown had been stealing from people for years, hiding behind legal paperwork and social power. If the law wouldn't stop him, someone had to. You don't have to do this, Caleb said that evening as they prepared to leave. We could still find another way. What other way? We're out of time and out of options. Mara checked the dark clothes she'd borrowed from Tom, practical for night work, anonymous enough not to identify her if seen. This is the only play we have left. They left after dark, riding quiet horses on a route that avoided the main road. Marcus stayed behind to watch the ranch. Tom came with them, planning to wait with the horses while they went inside. The ride took 2 hours, long enough for Mara's fear to cycle through terror and come out the other side as a strange, crystalline calm. This was happening. She was doing this. No point in second-guessing now. Crown's ranch appeared in the moonlight, much larger than Caleb's, with a house that looked more like a mansion and outbuildings that spoke of serious money. The office was separate from the main house, a small structure near the barn where Crown handled business. They waited in the trees, watching. Most of the house was dark. One window showed light, probably a servant left behind while Crown was in town. No movement visible. "Ready?" Caleb whispered. Mara nodded, not trusting her voice. They crossed the open ground quickly, staying low. The office door was locked, but Caleb had brought tools, skills he'd learned growing up rough, he'd admitted, back when stealing food was sometimes the difference between eating and starving. The lock clicked open. They slipped inside. Moonlight through the window provided just enough illumination to see by. The office was neat, organized, with filing cabinets along one wall and a large desk dominating the center. Everything labeled, everything in its place. The mark of a man who controlled his world completely. Mara went straight to the filing cabinets while Caleb watched the door. The first cabinet held current contracts, cattle sales, equipment purchases, standard business. The second held correspondence. The third was locked separately. "Here," Mara whispered. "Help me." Caleb's tools made quick work of the cabinet lock. Inside were ledgers, multiple years' worth, going back at least 5. Mara pulled out the most recent one and carried it to the desk where the moonlight was strongest. She'd been doing bookkeeping long enough to spot irregularities quickly, and this ledger was full of them, payments recorded for work never completed, loans made to neighboring ranchers at astronomical interest rates, fees charged for services that were never specified, and most damning, multiple entries showing debts that increased over time even as payments were being made. "He's been doing this to everyone," Mara breathed. "Look, the Patterson Ranch, the Weber place, even the Johnsons. They're all being bled dry exactly like Caleb. Can you prove it?" "The ledger is proof. These numbers don't lie." She kept flipping pages, her anger growing with each falsified entry. He's built his entire empire on cheating people too desperate or too scared to fight back. "Take it," Caleb said. "The whole ledger? Everything you can carry. We need to show people what he's been doing." Mara grabbed 3 years of ledgers, stuffed them into the bag she'd brought. She was reaching for a fourth when Caleb grabbed her arm. "Someone's coming." Footsteps outside. Voices. Multiple people, not just one. They'd been discovered. Caleb pulled Mara away from the desk, back toward the door they'd entered. But before they could reach it, the office door swung open and light flooded in from a lantern. Crown stood in the doorway, flanked by 2 ranch hands. His poker game must have ended early. Or maybe he'd never gone. Maybe this had been a trap all along. "Well," he said, his voice pleasant and poisonous. "Breaking and entering, that's a serious crime, Mr. Holt." "Mrs. Holt." He smiled at Mara. Or should I still call you Miss Densley? I hear the marriage was quite pragmatic. Caleb stepped in front of Mara, his hand moving toward his gun. I wouldn't, Crown said. Two more men appeared behind him, both armed. You're outnumbered and caught in the act of burglary. Shooting your way out just adds murder to the charges. We're not thieves, Mara said, finding her voice. We're gathering evidence. Evidence of what? Your fraud. Your years of cheating every rancher in this territory who couldn't fight back. She held up the ledgers. It's all here. Every falsified debt, every inflated charge, every lie you've used to steal land and money. Crown's smile didn't waver. Those are my private business records, stolen from my property by trespassers. No court will accept them as evidence. They're inadmissible. People will still see them, still know what you've done. Will they? Or will they see a desperate woman and her failing rancher husband who broke into a respected businessman's office and forged documents to avoid paying legitimate debts? He stepped closer. Your word against mine, Mrs. Holt. Who do you think the town will believe? The trap closed around them like a fist. Here's what's going to happen, Crown continued. You're going to put those ledgers back. Then you're going to leave my property. And on Monday, you're going to pay the $300 you owe me in full, or I'm going to foreclose on your ranch and press charges for tonight's break-in. If you're lucky, you'll only lose the property. If you're unlucky, you'll lose your freedom too. We don't have $300, Caleb said. Then you'd better find it, or start packing. Crown's expression hardened. I gave you a chance, Miss Densley. Offered you legitimate employment, good pay, a future. You chose this struggling ranch and this failing man instead. Now you'll live with the consequences. Mara's hands tightened on the ledgers. They'd come so close. Had the proof right here, in her hands, evidence that could destroy Crown's reputation and stop his predatory lending. And it was all useless because they'd obtained it illegally. Put them back, Crown said. Now. Caleb's hand was still near his gun. Mara could see him calculating odds, measuring distances. Could see the moment he decided that 5 armed men were too many, that getting killed wouldn't save the ranch. Do what he says, Caleb said quietly. But do it. Mara walked back to the filing cabinet, her vision blurring with tears of frustration. She was putting the ledgers back when she noticed something. A name on one of the folders in the cabinet, half hidden behind the ledgers she'd removed. Patterson legal complaint, dismissed. She knew that name. The Pattersons had been one of the families in Crown's ledger, one of the ranches he'd been bleeding dry. Her hand moved almost of its own accord, slipped the folder out of the cabinet, tucked it inside her jacket while Crown's attention was on Caleb. All of them, Crown said sharply. Mara put the last ledger back, closed the cabinet, kept her jacket closed and her expression neutral. They were escorted off the property at gunpoint. Crown's men watched until they'd mounted their horses and disappeared into the darkness. Tom was waiting where they'd left him, saw their faces, and didn't ask questions. They rode home in silence. It wasn't until they were back at the ranch, safe in the barn office with the door barred, that Mara pulled out the folder she'd stolen. Inside were legal documents. A complaint filed by Henry Patterson against Silas Crown for fraudulent debt collection. Affidavits from other ranchers supporting Patterson's claims. Evidence that Crown had been inflating debts and forging signatures. And a dismissal order. The case had been thrown out 3 months ago. Insufficient evidence, the judge had ruled. Mr. Patterson had failed to provide adequate documentation of his claims. He tried, Mara said, spreading the papers across the desk. Patterson tried to fight back, had other people willing to testify, and he still lost. Because Crown got to the judge first, Caleb said bitterly. Or had friends in the right places. Or just had better lawyers. Mara kept reading. The affidavits were detailed. Other ranchers describing the same patterns they'd seen in Crown's ledgers. Debts that grew instead of shrinking. Fees for services never rendered. Threats of foreclosure used to keep people in line. It was all there. Everything they needed to prove Crown was a fraud. Everything except the proof itself. The ledgers would have made this stick, Mara said. These affidavits describe what Crown's doing, but without the actual books to back them up, it's just accusations. So we're back where we started. No, we're worse off. Now Crown knows we're on to him. He'll be watching, waiting for us to make another move. She looked at the deadline notice still pinned to the wall. We have 2 weeks to pay $300 we don't have, or lose everything. Caleb slumped into a chair. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked defeated. I'm sorry. I thought we could find something, thought we could fight back. I just made everything worse. We both made this choice, Mara said, and we're not done yet. Mara Chishas, we're not done, she repeated firmly. Patterson's case failed because he didn't have the ledgers, but we know where they are now. We know what's in them. We can't steal them again. Crown will be watching his office. Then we don't steal them. We find another way to prove fraud. Mara was thinking out loud now, pieces falling into place. The ledgers showed debts to multiple ranchers. If we can find those people, get them to compare their records with what they actually paid versus what Crown claims they owe, they won't talk. They're too scared. Maybe, but maybe some of them are as desperate as we are. Maybe some of them are tired of being afraid. She looked at him directly. You said we fight by finding allies, so let's find them. It was a long shot. It probably wouldn't work, but it was all they had. They started the next morning. Caleb rode out to visit neighboring ranchers while Mara organized the evidence they did have, Patterson's failed lawsuit, her own documentation of Caleb's debts, the timeline showing how Crown's charges had escalated. The first 3 ranchers Caleb approached refused to talk. Too risky, they said. Can't afford to make an enemy of Crown. Sorry, but it's not our fight. The 4th rancher, Samuel Weber, listened to Caleb's pitch and then pulled out his own records. I've been tracking this for 2 years, Weber said, showing Caleb ledgers that mirrored Mara's findings. Knew something wasn't right, couldn't prove it. Every time I questioned Crown, he'd produce paperwork showing I was wrong. But the numbers never added up. Will you testify to that? Weber was quiet for a long time. If I do, I'm finished. Crown will destroy me. He's destroying you anyway, Caleb said. Just doing it slowly enough you don't notice until it's too late. And if we fight and lose, then at least we fought. At least we tried. Caleb met his eyes. I'm tired of letting powerful men win because good people are too scared to stand against them. Weber nodded slowly. All right, I'm in. 2 more ranchers joined over the next 3 days. Both had stories identical to Caleb's, debts that increased mysteriously, payments that never seemed to reduce the principal, threats of foreclosure used to keep them compliant. They had allies. Not many, but some. The question was whether it would be enough. Mara was working late in the office, comparing the ranchers' records and building a timeline of Crown's fraud, when she heard a horse approaching fast. She grabbed the rifle Caleb had insisted she keep nearby and went to the window. The rider wasn't one of Crown's men. It was a woman, middle-aged, well-dressed, riding side saddle in the dark like she'd done it 1,000 times. Mara met her at the door. Can I help you? You're Mara Holt. Not a question. Yes. I'm Tessa Miller. I own the Miller Ranch, about 10 miles east. She dismounted stiffly. I heard you're gathering evidence against Silas Crown. News really did travel impossibly fast out here. We're trying. I can help. Tessa pulled a packet from her saddlebag. My late husband fought Crown 5 years ago. Died before the case went to trial, officially from a fall, but I've always had my doubts. These are his records. Everything he documented about Crown's business practices. Mara took the packet with shaking hands. Inside were ledgers, correspondence, and detailed notes about patterns of fraud that matched exactly what they'd been finding. Why now? Mara asked. Why not come forward 5 years ago? Because 5 years ago I was alone and scared. My husband was dead, Crown was powerful, and no one would stand with me. Tessa's expression was hard. But you're standing, you and your husband and the others, and I'm tired of being silent while that man destroys good people. If you help us, he'll come after you. He's been coming after me for 5 years, taking my water rights, blocking my cattle sales, spreading rumors about my dead husband's debts. I've been fighting alone this whole time. She looked at Mara directly. Now I don't have to be alone anymore. By the end of the week, they had 7 ranchers willing to testify. 7 sets of records showing the same patterns of fraud. 7 people ready to stand against Crown despite the risks. It still might not be enough. But it was more than they'd had before. Evan Pierce reviewed their evidence with a lawyer's careful eye. It's circumstantial, he said. Suggestive, but not conclusive. Without the actual ledgers from Crown's office, it's your word against his. What if we had a witness? Mara asked. Someone who worked for Crown and could testify to what they saw? That would change everything. But finding someone willing to betray Crown, Evan shook his head. That's asking someone to commit career suicide. Mara thought about the clerk she'd seen limping around town, the one who worked in Crown's land office, filing paperwork and witnessing documents, the one who always looked tired and defeated, like he'd stopped expecting life to get better. I might know someone, she said. His name was Chester Grimes, and he'd been Crown's clerk for 15 years. Mara found him at the boarding house where he lived, in a room that smelled like whiskey and regret. I can't help you, he said immediately when she explained why she'd come. Crown would destroy me. He's destroying you anyway. You limp because of that leg injury, don't you? The one you got falling from a ladder while fixing Crown's roof on your day off? Chester's face went white. How did you... I've been reviewing records. You weren't paid for that work, and you've been paying for your own medical care even though the injury happened on Crown's property. Mara kept her voice gentle. He's been using you for 15 years, underpaying you, overworking you, keeping you loyal through fear. When does it end? When I'm dead, I suppose. Why? Chester laughed bitterly. Look, I know what Crown is. I've seen what he does. Filed the paperwork that made it legal. But testifying against him? That's a death sentence. Or it's freedom. Mara pulled out the packet of evidence. We have 7 ranchers willing to stand up. We have documentation going back years. We have everything except insider confirmation. You could be the key that locks him away. And if you lose, then we lose together. But at least we tried. Chester stared at the evidence for a long time. Mara could see the war happening behind his eyes, fear battling with something that might have been hope. He has a safe, Chester said finally. In his office. Keeps copies of all the real ledgers there, the ones that show what he actually did versus what he reported. Mara's heart kicked. You've seen them? Filed them myself. Years of fraud, all documented. He keeps them as insurance, blackmail material if anyone ever gets powerful enough to threaten him. Can you get access to the safe? Maybe. I have keys to the office. Don't have the combination to the safe, but... He hesitated. I know where he keeps it written down. Always thought it was stupid, but Crown's memory isn't what it used to be. If you help us get those ledgers, we can end this. Stop him from hurting anyone else. Chester looked at her for a long moment. Then he said, When? They planned it for Wednesday night, the night before the foreclosure deadline. One last desperate gamble. Chester would let them into the office after dark, would open the safe using the combination Crown kept hidden in his desk drawer. They'd take the real ledgers, the ones showing every fraudulent transaction, and disappear before anyone knew they'd been there. It was insane. It was illegal. It was their only chance. The night came cold and clear. Mara dressed in dark clothes again, her hands trembling as she buttoned Sarah's old jacket. Caleb checked his gun, his face grim. Last chance to back out, he said. I'm not backing out. If we're caught, we won't be caught. Chester will make sure. Chester could be setting us up, could be working with Crown right now, leading us into another trap. Mara had considered that possibility, weighed it against the alternative of doing nothing and losing everything by deadline tomorrow. I trust him, she said. Why? Because he looked at me the same way I looked at you when you stopped the coach, like someone drowning who just spotted land. They rode to Crown's ranch in silence. Chester was waiting in the shadows near the office, looking terrified but determined. Guards making rounds every hour, he whispered. We have 45 minutes, maybe less. He unlocked the office door. They slipped inside. The safe was behind a painting on the wall, theatrical and obvious, like Crown's ego couldn't resist the cliché. Chester found the combination in the desk drawer, exactly where he'd said it would be. The safe opened with a soft click. Inside were ledgers. Dozens of them. Years and years of documented fraud, all carefully recorded in Crown's own hand. Take them all, Mara breathed. They stuffed ledgers into bags, working as fast as they dared. Mara's hands were shaking so badly she nearly dropped one. Someone's coming, Chester hissed from the window. They froze, footsteps outside, getting closer. Go, Chester said. Out the back. I'll lock up behind you. Make it look like nothing happened. What about you? Caleb asked. I'll say I was doing inventory. He won't question it. Chester's smile was shaky. Go, before you're caught. They went. Out the back door into the darkness, carrying bags full of evidence that could destroy Crown or get them all killed. Behind them, the office door closed, locked, and somewhere in the darkness, a guard's lantern bobbed closer. They made it back to the ranch just before dawn, spread the ledgers across every available surface, started reading. It was worse than they'd imagined. Crown had been systematically defrauding ranchers for over a decade, creating false debts, inflating real ones, using legal manipulation to force people off their land. He'd built an empire on theft, and the ledgers proved it. This is enough, Evan Pierce said when they showed him at first light. His hands were actually shaking as he read. This is more than enough. We take this to the territorial judge, file charges, and Crown goes to prison. Can we do it before the foreclosure deadline? Mara asked. Evan checked his pocket watch. Deadline's at noon. It's 7 now. If we ride hard, we can reach the territorial courthouse by 10. File the evidence, get an emergency injunction to stop the foreclosure. He looked up, eyes bright. We can actually win this. They rode out within the hour, Mara, Caleb, Evan, and Tom carrying the ledgers. Marcus stayed behind to guard the ranch in case Crown tried something desperate. The ride was hard and fast. Mara clung to her saddle, her body aching, her mind racing with possibilities. They were going to make it. They were actually going to stop Crown. They reached the courthouse at 10:15, rushed inside, found the territorial judge, and discovered Crown was already there. He stood in the judge's chambers, calm and composed, with 2 lawyers flanking him like guards. Mr. Holt, he said pleasantly. Mrs. Holt, I've been expecting you. Mara's stomach dropped. It seems there was a break-in at my ranch last night, Crown continued. Someone stole valuable business records from my office, and I have a witness who saw you leaving the property around midnight. Chester. It had been a setup after all. These ledgers are evidence of your crimes, Evan said, holding up the bags. They show years of systematic fraud. They show private business records stolen during a burglary, Crown interrupted. Inadmissible in court. And even if they weren't, they've been in your possession for hours. Plenty of time to alter them, forge entries, create false evidence. The judge looked between them, expression carefully neutral. Mr. Pierce, did you obtain these documents legally? They were obtained by necessity, Evan said. To prevent an ongoing fraud. Did you obtain them legally? Silence. Then I can't accept them as evidence. I'm sorry. The judge actually did look sorry. My hands are tied. If the documents were stolen, they're inadmissible regardless of what they contain. But he's been defrauding people for years. Mara's voice was rising. It's all documented right here, in his own handwriting, which you obtained through illegal means. I understand your frustration, Mrs. Holt, but the law is clear. Crown's smile was triumphant. Now, about my foreclosure filing. The deadline is noon today. Mr. and Mrs. Holt owe me $300. Do you have the payment? Caleb's face was stone. No. Then by law, I'm entitled to seize your property. Judge, I'd like to file the necessary paperwork. Wait! Mara's mind was racing, searching for any angle, any possibility. Those ledgers. You said they were stolen from your safe. Yes. So you're admitting they exist, that they're real. Crown's smile faltered slightly. I'm admitting someone stole documents from my property. Documents that you kept in a safe, important enough to lock away, important enough to guard. Mara was speaking faster now, an idea forming. If they're just routine business records, why the safe? Why hide them? I don't hide anything. You keep 2 sets of books, don't you? One for show, one for truth. And the truth is in that safe because you know what it proves. This is speculation, one of Crown's lawyers said. Then prove me wrong. Open your records. Show us the real books. If they match what you've been claiming, you have nothing to hide. The room went very quiet. I don't have to prove anything, Crown said. His voice was harder now. You're the ones who committed burglary. You're the ones facing criminal charges. We'll face those charges, Mara said, after you open your books and show the court they match your lien filings. I refuse. Why? If you're legitimate, If your debts are real, showing your records would vindicate you completely. Prove we're liars and thieves, making false accusations. Mara looked at the judge. An honest businessman would welcome the chance to clear his name. The judge was watching Crown now, with new interest. That's a fair point, Mr. Crown. If you're claiming these stolen ledgers are forgeries or alterations of your legitimate records, producing the originals would resolve the question immediately. My business records are private, not when they're being used as evidence in a foreclosure proceeding. If Mrs. Holt is questioning the validity of your lien, you need to provide documentation to support it. Crown's jaw tightened. This is ridiculous. The lien is legal, properly filed. Then produce the underlying documentation, the original contracts, the invoices for work completed, the proof of debt. The judge's voice was firm now. I'm ordering you to open your business records for review. I won't. You will, or I'll dismiss the foreclosure and launch an investigation into your business practices. The judge stood. I want those records on my desk by tomorrow morning. Real records, not convenient summaries. Everything related to the Holt debt and any similar claims against other ranchers. Crown's face had gone purple. This is outrageous. This is justice. Court adjourned. They walked out of the courthouse in a daze. Crown stormed past them without a word, his lawyers hurrying to keep up. Did we just win? Caleb asked. We bought time, Evan said. If Crown produces his real books, they'll show the same fraud as the stolen ledgers. If he doesn't produce them, the judge will dismiss his lien. Either way, he's cornered. Unless he destroys the evidence, Mara said. He won't, Evan said confidently. Too many people know about them now. Destroying evidence after a court order would be obstruction. Even Crown's not that stupid. They rode home slowly, exhaustion settling over them like fog. The ranch appeared in the afternoon light, looking the same as always, small, rough, imperfect. Home. Mara realized she'd stopped thinking of it as Caleb's ranch weeks ago. Somewhere along the way, it had become theirs. Marcus met them in the yard, rifle in hand. How'd it go? We're still here, Caleb said. That's something. That night, Mara sat at the kitchen table writing a letter she prayed she'd never have to send. It detailed everything: the evidence they'd found, Crown's fraud, the territorial judge's order, and the location where Evan was keeping copies of the stolen ledgers. She sealed it, addressed it to a circuit judge she knew sometimes traveled through the territory. What's that? Caleb asked. Insurance. If something happens to us, if Crown tries something desperate, someone will know the truth. Do you think he'll come here? I think we backed him into a corner. Cornered animals are dangerous. She looked at him across the table. We should be ready. They prepared through the evening, checked weapons, secured the buildings, made plans for where everyone would go if armed men came riding in. Mara worked by lamplight, organizing papers and making copies. If Crown sent men to destroy evidence, she wanted to make sure some survived. She was finishing when she heard horses, multiple riders coming fast. Caleb, she called. He was already at the window, rifle ready. Tom and Marcus appeared from the barn, armed and alert. The riders came into view, 20 men, maybe more, torches lighting the darkness. They'd come. Mara grabbed her own rifle, her hands surprisingly steady. She positioned herself at a window while Caleb took the front door. The riders stopped at the edge of the yard. Silas Crown at the front, flanked by hired guns. Halt, he shouted. You have something that belongs to me. Return it, and we ride away. Refuse, and we take it by force. Caleb stepped onto the porch, rifle across his chest. Nothing here belongs to you. The ledgers, the documents you stole from my office. Hand them over. Can't do that. They're evidence in a legal proceeding now. The hell they are. They're stolen property, and I'm taking them back. Try it. Caleb's voice was calm. But you better be ready to explain to the judge why you destroyed evidence after he ordered you to produce it. There won't be any evidence to produce if it burns in the fire. Crown gestured to his men. We're coming in. You can surrender or you can die defending a losing cause. Your choice. The hired guns started to dismount. And then Mara heard something else. More horses, coming from the east. The riders appeared in the darkness. Samuel Weber, Tessa Miller, the other ranchers who'd joined their cause. Behind them, more people, neighbors, townspeople, men and women who'd heard what was happening and decided to stand. They formed a line between Crown's men and the house. "You'll have to go through all of us," Weber said. Crown stared at them, his expression twisting from confidence to fury to something that might have been fear. "This isn't over," he said. "Yes," Mara called from the doorway. "It is." Crown's men looked at each other, looked at the crowd facing them, started backing toward their horses. Crown sat alone on his mount, surrounded by people he'd spent years intimidating and controlling, and for the first time he was the one who was outnumbered. "Tomorrow," he said, "I'll have those books on the judge's desk tomorrow, and they'll prove every debt is legitimate." "We'll see," Tessa Miller said. Crown rode away, his men following. The torches disappeared into the darkness. The crowd stayed until dawn, keeping watch. Mara brought out coffee, what food they had. People sat around the yard, talking quietly, keeping vigil. "Thank you," Mara said to Tessa. "How did you know to come?" "Chester Grimes sent word. Said Crown was planning something tonight. Thought you might need help." Tessa smiled. Turns out he was right. Morning came without further trouble. The crowd dispersed slowly, people heading home with promises to return if needed. Mara and Caleb stood on the porch, watching the sun rise over land that was, for now, still theirs. "Think Crown will actually produce those books?" Caleb asked. "He has to. The judge ordered it. And if the books have been altered, if he spent all night forging new records, then we fight with what we have. The testimony, the affidavits, Chester's witness statement." Mara leaned against the porch rail. "We're not done yet." The letter to the circuit judge sat sealed on the table inside, just in case, because Mara had learned the hard way that you could do everything right and still lose, could have truth on your side and still get destroyed by people with more power and fewer scruples. But you fought anyway. You stood up anyway. And sometimes, if you were very lucky, other people stood up with you. They didn't sleep. How could they? Tomorrow would determine everything, whether they kept the ranch or lost it, whether Crown faced justice or walked away untouched, whether their desperate gamble had been worth the risk. Mara spent the pre-dawn hours organizing documents one final time, making sure every piece of evidence was cataloged and ready. Her hands moved automatically through familiar motions while her mind raced ahead to the courthouse, to the moment when Crown would have to produce his records or admit he couldn't. Caleb checked on the horses, the cattle, the fence lines, doing the work that would need doing regardless of what happened in court, as if keeping the routine would somehow keep the world from falling apart. They met at breakfast, neither having any appetite. Tom pushed eggs around his plate. Marcus drank coffee and said nothing. The silence felt heavy, expectant. "Whatever happens today," Caleb said finally, "I want you to know this was worth it. Worth fighting back, standing up, even if we lose." "We're not going to lose," Mara said. She said it with more confidence than she felt. They rode into town at 8, giving themselves plenty of time before the 9 o'clock hearing. The streets were already busy. Word had spread about the confrontation, and it seemed like half the territory had come to watch. Evan Pierce met them at the courthouse steps, looking haggard but determined. "Crown filed his documents an hour ago. I haven't seen them yet, but the clerk says it's extensive." "Extensive how?" Mara asked. "Multiple ledgers, contracts, correspondence. He's claiming he has complete documentation of every transaction." Mara's stomach twisted. If Crown had spent the night forging records, creating false evidence to counter their claims, they might not be able to prove anything. Their stolen ledgers would be dismissed as inadmissible, and his forgeries would stand as legitimate. They were walking into the courthouse when someone called Mara's name. She turned to find Chester Grimes hurrying toward them, his limp more pronounced than usual. His face was bruised, one eye swollen nearly shut. "What happened?" Mara asked. "Crown figured out I helped you, had some of his men visit me last night." Chester's voice was thick, painful. "They wanted to know what I told you, what I showed you. I didn't tell them anything." "You should have," Caleb said. "Should have told them everything if it meant staying safe." "No." Chester stood straighter despite the pain. "I've been keeping quiet for 15 years, watching him hurt people, filing paperwork that made it legal. I'm done being quiet. He pulled a package from inside his coat. These are copies of the real ledgers, the ones from the safe. I made them 3 years ago when I realized what he was doing. Been keeping them hidden, waiting for someone brave enough to use them. Mara took the package with trembling hands. Why didn't you come forward before? Because I was scared. Because no one was standing up, so why should I risk everything alone? Chester's good eye was fierce. But you stood. You and Caleb and all those ranchers, so I'm standing too. This could get you killed, Evan said quietly. Maybe, but at least I'll die having done one good thing. Chester straightened his shoulders. Let's go show that bastard he can't win. The courtroom was packed, every seat filled, people standing along the walls, more crowding in the hallway. Mara recognized faces from town, shopkeepers, ranch wives, men who'd looked away when she walked past, all here to witness what would happen when someone finally challenged Silas Crown. Crown sat at the plaintiff's table with his 2 lawyers, looking confident and composed. The bruises on Chester's face hadn't touched him. The fear in everyone else's eyes only seemed to make him stronger. The territorial judge entered, an older man named Harrison, whom Evan had described as fair but cautious. He took his seat and surveyed the packed courtroom with raised eyebrows. Well, this is certainly more attention than I usually receive. He shuffled papers. We're here regarding the foreclosure filing by Silas Crown against Caleb and Mara Holt. Mr. Crown, you've submitted documentation. Yes, Your Honor, complete records of all transactions with Mr. Holt. Crown's lead lawyer stood, presenting thick folders. Contracts for fence repairs, equipment loans, consultation services, all properly signed and witnessed. Mrs. Holt, you're disputing these debts? Mara stood, her legs steadier than she expected. Yes, Your Honor. We believe the charges are fraudulent, inflated far beyond the actual work completed. And you have evidence of this? We do. Evan presented their documents. The affidavits from other ranchers, Chester's copies of the real ledgers, the timeline showing how Crown's charges had escalated without corresponding work. The judge reviewed both sets of documents for what felt like hours. The courtroom waited in tense silence. Finally, Judge Harrison looked up. These ledgers you've submitted, Mrs. Holt. Where did they come from? They're copies of records kept in Mr. Crown's safe, Mara said, made by his clerk, Mr. Chester Grimes, who had authorized access to the originals. I see. And Mr. Grimes is present to testify to this? Chester stood, his bruised face visible to everyone in the courtroom. I am, Your Honor. A murmur ran through the crowd. Crown's expression remained neutral, but Mara saw his hands tighten on the table. Mr. Grimes, are you claiming these copies are accurate representations of Mr. Crown's business records? Yes, sir. I made them myself 3 years ago, directly from the ledgers Mr. Crown kept in his office safe. And why did you make copies? Because I knew what was in them. Years of fraud, falsified debts, charges for work never completed. I knew it was wrong, but I was too scared to do anything about it. Chester's voice grew stronger. Until these people showed me what courage looks like. Crown's lawyer was on his feet. Your Honor, this is highly irregular. Mr. Grimes had no authority to copy private business records. He was Mr. Crown's employee with access to said records, the judge interrupted. Unless you're claiming he stole them. I'm claiming the copies could be fraudulent, altered to support Mrs. Holt's baseless accusations. Then let's compare them to the originals. Judge Harrison looked at Crown. Mr. Crown, you brought your ledgers. Crown's lawyer hesitated. We brought relevant documentation. I asked for ledgers, actual books showing business transactions over time, not curated summaries. The judge's voice hardened. Do you have them or not? Your Honor, our records are organized by client, not chronologically. Mr. Crown, the judge leaned forward. Yesterday, I ordered you to produce your complete business records. Did you bring them to this courthouse? The silence stretched like a wire pulled taut. Some of them, Crown said finally. Some of them. Which ones? The relevant ones, the files pertaining to Mr. Holt's debt. Not the complete ledgers I requested? I didn't think... You didn't think I needed to see your full business records to verify the accuracy of a single debt claim? The judge's eyebrows rose. Mr. Crown, I've been a judge for 23 years. When someone refuses to produce complete records after a direct order, it usually means those records contain something they don't want me to see. That's preposterous. Bailiff, the judge gestured. I want you to ride to Mr. Crown's ranch with a deputy. Retrieve the ledgers from his office safe. All of them. Bring them back here within 2 hours. Crown shot to his feet. You can't. I can, and I am. This is a court order, Mr. Crown. Refuse to comply, and I'll hold you in contempt. Judge Harrison's expression was granite. You wanted to use the law to seize property from these people? Then you'll submit to the law yourself. The bailiff left. The courtroom erupted in whispers. Mara felt lightheaded. This was happening. The judge was actually forcing Crown to produce the evidence that would destroy him, unless he'd already destroyed it. The thought must have shown on her face because Evan leaned close and whispered, He won't have destroyed them. Too many people know they exist now. Destroying them would be admission of guilt. What if he did anyway? Then we work with what we have. Chester's copies, the affidavits, the pattern of fraud. It won't be as strong, but it's still substantial. The wait was agonizing. The judge recessed the hearing, but no one left the courtroom. They sat in tense silence, waiting for the bailiff to return. Mara watched Crown. He'd resumed his seat, his face composed, but she could see the calculation behind his eyes. He was planning something, adjusting strategy, looking for an exit. 90 minutes later, the bailiff returned carrying 2 large boxes. He set them on the judge's bench with a heavy thud. Found them in a safe, just like you said, Your Honor. Combination was in the desk drawer. Judge Harrison opened the first box, pulled out a ledger, started reading. His expression changed, neutral to confused to angry in the space of 30 seconds. He read for 5 minutes, then 10. Then he looked up at Crown with something that might have been discussed. Mr. Crown, can you explain why your ledger entries for fence repairs to the Holt property total $120, but your lien filing claims $175? There were additional costs, materials, labor, not listed anywhere in this ledger. In fact, the ledger notes that Mr. Holt provided his own materials and that the work was completed in 3 days, not the 2 weeks your filing suggests. Crown's jaw tightened. Those notations may be incomplete. Maybe? The judge flipped pages. What about the Weber Ranch? Your ledger shows a debt of $80. Your court filing last year claimed $200. Care to explain the discrepancy? Errors in transcription. Errors that always favor you? That's quite a pattern of mistakes, Mr. Crown. The judge pulled out more ledgers, compared them to the documents Crown had submitted. These numbers don't match, not even close. You've been systematically inflating debts, charging for work never completed, and using legal filings to make the fraud look legitimate. Your Honor, I object to this characterization. Object all you want. The evidence is right here, in your own handwriting. Judge Harrison looked at the courtroom. I'm dismissing the foreclosure against the Holts. Furthermore, I'm ordering a full investigation into Mr. Crown's business practices. Every lien, every debt claim, every contract he's filed in this territory for the past 10 years. The courtroom exploded. People shouting, crying, some cheering. Mara sat frozen, unable to fully process what had just happened. They'd won. But Judge Harrison wasn't finished. He banged his gavel for silence. Mr. Crown, I'm also referring this matter to the territorial attorney for potential criminal prosecution. What you've done isn't just unethical. It's fraud, pure and simple. And fraud on this scale deserves punishment. Crown's face had gone white. Your Honor, surely we can discuss. There's nothing to discuss. You used the legal system as a weapon to rob honest people. You filed false claims, inflated debts, and destroyed lives with paperwork and intimidation. The judge's voice was cold. I've seen a lot of things in my career, Mr. Crown, but I've rarely seen someone so systematically abuse the law. You should be ashamed. For the first time since Mara had met him, Silas Crown looked small, defeated. The confidence that had carried him through years of fraud crumbled in the face of actual consequences. Court adjourned, the judge said. Bailiff, make sure Mr. Crown remains available for questioning. The courtroom erupted again. People crowded around Mara and Caleb, shaking hands, offering congratulations. Samuel Weber was crying openly. Tessa Miller looked like a weight had been lifted from her shoulders. Chester Grimes stood apart, watching Crown being led away by the bailiff. When he caught Mara's eye, he smiled, painful through the bruises, but genuine. She pushed through the crowd to reach him. "Thank you. We couldn't have done this without you. I should have done it years ago, should have stood up the first time I saw him cheat someone." Chester's voice was rough. "But at least I did it now. At least I helped stop him. What will you do now? Find honest work, I suppose, though I don't imagine many people will want to hire Crown's former clerk." "I'll hire you," Caleb said, appearing beside Mara. "If you're willing. We need someone who understands legal filing and business documentation, someone we can trust." Chester stared at him. "You'd hire me? After I worked for Crown all those years? You also stopped him. That counts for more." Caleb extended his hand. "What do you say? Want to help us rebuild what Crown tried to destroy?" Chester's smile widened. "Yes. Yes, I do." They walked out of the courthouse into afternoon sunshine. The crowd followed, still celebrating, still processing the magnitude of what had just happened. Evan pulled Mara aside. "You did it. I honestly didn't think it was possible, but you actually took down Silas Crown." "We did it, all of us." Mara looked at the crowd, ranchers, townspeople, everyone who'd stood with them against impossible odds. "Turns out courage is contagious. What's next for you two?" Mara looked at Caleb, who was talking with Tom and Marcus, his expression lighter than she'd seen in weeks. "We run a ranch, pay our actual debts, help other people fight their battles with Crown, try to build something worth keeping. And your marriage? That was just for legal protection, right? Was it?" Mara thought about the past weeks, working beside Caleb, planning strategies, standing together against threats. Thought about the way he'd never tried to control her, never questioned her decisions, never treated her as anything less than an equal partner. Thought about how somewhere along the way the business arrangement had started feeling like something more. "I don't know," she admitted. "We started as partners. We're still partners. Everything else," she shrugged. "We'll figure it out." Evan smiled. "That's probably the healthiest marriage philosophy I've ever heard." They were loading the wagon when a rider approached. A courier Mara recognized from the Territorial Postal Service. "Mrs. Holt, I have a letter for you." Mara took it with shaking hands. The handwriting on the envelope was Uncle Gideon's. She opened it standing in the courthouse yard with Caleb reading over her shoulder. The letter was brief and poisonous. Gideon had heard about the marriage, about the legal battle, about her defiance of every social convention. He was disgusted, disappointed, and completely disowning her. She was no longer welcome in his house or his family. As far as he was concerned, she'd made her choice and would have to live with the consequences. The letter should have hurt, should have felt like loss. Instead, Mara felt free. "You all right?" Caleb asked quietly. "Better than all right." She folded the letter carefully. "He's cutting me loose. No more obligations, no more expectations, no more family trying to control my life." "That's what you wanted?" "That's exactly what I wanted." She looked up at him. "Freedom to choose, even if those choices look wrong to everyone else." They rode home in the golden afternoon light. The land rolled past, grass and sky and endless space. Their land now, legally and completely. No liens, no threats, no Silas Crown lurking in the background. Just a ranch, a partnership, and a future they could actually plan. Tom and Marcus had dinner waiting when they arrived. Not fancy, beef stew and bread, but it tasted like celebration anyway. "So what now?" Marcus asked. "We're solvent, Crown's going to prison, and you two are legally married. What's the next crisis?" "Hopefully none," Caleb said. "I'm done with crises for a while." "We need to help the other ranchers," Mara said. "The ones Crown defrauded. Now that his records are public, they can challenge their debts, get their land back. But they'll need help navigating the legal system." "You planning to become a lawyer?" Tom asked with a grin. "No. But I can help with the paperwork, the documentation, make sure they have what they need to fight back." She looked at Caleb. "If that's all right with you, might take time away from ranch work." "It's more than all right. It's perfect." Caleb raised his glass. "To fighting back. To standing up. To whatever comes next. They drank to that. Later, after the dishes were cleared and Tom and Marcus had retreated to the bunkhouse, Mara and Caleb stood on the porch watching stars emerge. "I've been thinking," Caleb said, "about our arrangement, the marriage contract." Mara's heart kicked. "What about it?" "It specifies this is a business partnership. Separate finances, separate lives, either party free to leave with notice." "That's what we agreed." "I know. And if that's still what you want, that's fine, but—" He paused, choosing words carefully. "Somewhere along the way, this stopped feeling like just business to me." Mara's breath caught. "To me too." "Yeah?" He looked at her directly. "So what do we do about that?" "I don't know. I've never done this before, building something real instead of just surviving whatever was thrown at me." She smiled. "We'll have to figure it out as we go." "I can work with that." He took her hand, not a handshake this time, but something warmer. "Partners?" "Partners," she agreed, "in business and whatever else we decide to build." He kissed her then, soft and careful, like testing new ground. Mara leaned into it, letting it happen, letting herself want something that wasn't just safety or survival, but actual happiness. When they pulled apart, she was smiling. "That was nice," she said. "Yeah?" "Yeah. We should probably do it again sometime." "I can arrange that." They stood together on the porch, hands linked, looking out at land they'd fought for and won. The future stretched ahead, uncertain, unplanned, full of work and risk and possibility, exactly the way Mara wanted it. The next weeks passed in a blur of activity. Mara helped 7 ranchers challenge their debts and reclaim their land. Chester proved invaluable, navigating legal filings with practiced ease while teaching Mara the finer points of territorial law. Crown's empire collapsed spectacularly. The investigation uncovered fraud touching dozens of families across 3 counties. He was arrested, tried, and sentenced to 15 years in territorial prison. His ranch and holdings were seized to pay restitution to his victims. Uncle Gideon sent one more letter, informing Mara that Howard Blackwell had married someone else, a proper young woman who understood her duty. Mara sent back a brief reply congratulating the bride and wishing her luck. She meant it sincerely. She wouldn't wish Howard Blackwell on anyone, but maybe his new wife would find a way to survive him the same way Mara had survived everything else, through stubbornness and strategic thinking. The ranch prospered, not dramatically, not overnight, but steadily. Cattle sales brought profit. Contract renegotiations saved money. Slowly, carefully, they built something sustainable. And somewhere along the way, the marriage that started as legal protection became something real. They still maintained separate rooms, old habits died hard, but the partnership deepened into genuine affection, then love, then the kind of solid foundation that could weather anything. 6 months after the courthouse victory, Mara stood in the barn office reviewing accounts and realized she was happy. Not just safe, not just surviving, but genuinely, completely happy. The door opened. Caleb leaned against the frame, dusty from a day working fences. "How are the books looking?" "Good. Really good. We'll turn a profit this quarter." "That's my brilliant wife." He said it casually now, like the word had always belonged to her. Wife, partner, business manager, friend. Mara had been called a lot of things in her life. Orphan, burden, cargo, disappointment. But these new names felt right in a way nothing else ever had. "Come look at this," she said, gesturing to the ledger. "I think we can afford to hire another hand. Maybe 2 if we're smart about it." Caleb joined her at the desk, looking over her shoulder at the neat columns of numbers. "You sure? Don't want to overextend." "I'm sure. We're stable now. Time to grow." "All right. I trust your judgment." He kissed the top of her head absently, already studying the figures. "Though we should probably discuss expanding the house too. Going to need more space if we're adding employees." "Or children," Mara said without thinking. Caleb went very still. "Children?" She felt her face heat. "I mean, eventually, if we wanted. Not saying we have to, just that it's a possibility we should maybe consider at some point in the—" He kissed her, cutting off the nervous rambling. "Yes," he said when they parted. "Someday. When we're ready." "When we're ready," Mara agreed. They stood together in the barn office, surrounded by evidence of their success, organized ledgers, paid bills, a future they'd fought for and won. Outside, the sun was setting over land that belonged to them completely. Mara thought about the stagecoach, the crying girl in the window, the cowboy who'd stopped to give her a choice. Thought about how one decision, one desperate, terrifying leap into the unknown, had changed everything. "Do you ever regret it?" she asked. "Stopping the coach that day?" Caleb was quiet for a moment. "Not once." "You?" "Not once. Even though it led to fraud investigations and break-ins and almost losing everything? Especially because of that." Mara smiled. "Those things mattered. We fought for something real, won something real, built something that can't be taken away by creditors or uncles or men who think power gives them the right to hurt people." "We built it together," Caleb corrected. "Yes, together." Evening shadows stretched across the yard. In the distance, cattle lowed softly. Tom was singing something off-key in the bunkhouse. Marcus was probably starting dinner, grumbling good-naturedly about everyone's appetites. Home. Not the house she'd grown up in, not the print shop she'd lost, not Uncle Gideon's mansion where a wedding dress hung waiting for a bride who never came. This rough ranch in the middle of nowhere, with its perpetual repairs and endless work and absolutely no guarantee of anything except the choice to try. That was home. "Come on," Caleb said, taking her hand. "Dinner's probably ready, and Marcus will complain if we're late." They walked to the house together, partners in every sense of the word, carrying the day's work and the promise of tomorrow. Behind them, the barn office door swung closed on ledgers that told a story, not of debts and foreclosures and desperate struggles, but of a business built honestly, a partnership forged in crisis, and a future earned through courage. The numbers were balanced, the accounts were clear, the ranch was theirs. And Mara Densley Holt, once cargo, once trapped, once convinced she had no choices, walked into her home with her husband beside her, and her future spread out ahead like the endless western sky. Free. Finally, completely, impossibly free. The story that began with tears in a stagecoach window ended with laughter in a kitchen where dinner was burning slightly because Marcus had been distracted arguing with Tom about the best way to break a stubborn horse. It ended with Caleb pulling Mara close while she tried to save the stew, with stolen kisses between stirring, with the comfortable chaos of people who'd become family through choice rather than obligation. It ended with possibility instead of constraint, with partnership instead of ownership, with a woman who'd been sent away in tears finding the cowboy who stopped it all and building a life worth fighting for. It ended, as all good stories do, with hope, and the quiet satisfaction of knowing that sometimes, when you're brave enough to choose yourself, the universe rewards you with exactly what you needed all along. Home, partnership, love, and the freedom to wake up every morning and choose it all again.